30th, 2021 Malden City Council meeting to order. Will you all please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please remain standing for a moment of silence as we remember and honor our service personnel, those in uniform, those who are currently serving, as well as those who have passed away, have given the ultimate sacrifice. Please, a moment of silence. Thank you. And I think Councilor Winslow, you had someone that you wanted to ask for a moment of silence?
Yes, Ed Lowney. Oops, let's see. I don't know if you can see this, but I think many of us who went to Stop and Shop knew Ed. He was a regular. He was one of the people who gathered carts and bagged. He was a graduate of the Perkins School of the Blind, and he also served on a Disabilities Commission. And just a nice example of someone who was very persistent and very independent. And showed many people with disabilities how to live independently. So just want to honor him with a moment of silence. So thank you.
Thank you. A moment of silence. Ed Downey?
Ed Lowney.
Thank you.
He lived at 59 Green Street and worked at Stop and Shop. Member of the
I remember him well.
UFCW.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Clerk will call the roll.
Mel. Camille.
Camille has called to tell me he would not be making this evening's meeting.
Okay, Condon.
Condon here.
Crow.
Here.
Di Maria.
Here.
Linehan.
Linehan here.
Murphy.
Murphy here.
O'Malley.
Present.
Tika.
Tsige here.
Spatafora. Winslow.
Winslow
We're
here.
here. We're
Anderson.
here. Sorry.
Anderson.
Anderson here. So thank you. Under the provisions of Governor Baker's rules, we are not having meetings at this point in person. We're doing it here by Zoom. In accordance with the governor's directions on that. And will there be anyone that'll be recording this evening, Mr. Lucy?
We're recording, John Mayara is on.
Okay. Good. How about MATV? Uma?
Yep, MATV, yep.
Okay. Okay. So let's go to our first order of business.
Okay, so there's guests and achievements, and I'm looking for the two guests being honored, and I don't know if they're on. Oh, no.
Well, I got word from one of the counselors who said that somehow we've got a mix up here. And they did not get, our guests did not get the word.
They may have not got the Zoom invite did go out to them late. It just went out about 10 minutes ago and I didn't see them on and I went back. So I didn't know whether someone had talked to them or not to come on.
Let's look at our attendee list and see. I do not see any of their names on here. That's a very unfortunate situation that we have two young women from our city that that have been recognized by the state legislature that we wanted to give honor and recognition to. That is Erga Pierrette and Birutki, who we all have known and have seen do great work here in the city of Malden. So we'll make sure that we get back in touch with them so we can give proper honor to those two young women that have done great things here in our city. So we'll
Okay.
move on to the next order of business.
Is public-
Council President,
Yes, Councilor Di Maria.
thank you. And whatever the administrative error happened, I'd like to make sure that we reschedule them 2 weeks from tonight, which would be the 13th of April, and make sure that we reach out to them. Whatever happened, it was, lousy that happened, because they're two amazing women in our community. And I apologize that did happen on all of our behalf, but maybe we can at this time schedule them for the 13th of April and reach out to see if that date is good for both of those gals.
So Mr. Lucy and Ms. Cagno, would you make sure that happens?
That will happen.
To, so,
Thank you so much.
so directed to do that.
Thank you.
Let me, Councilor Murphy's got her hand up. Councilor Murphy.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate what Councilor Di Maria said. I do believe that these two individuals, have received a wonderful acknowledgement from the state, and that we should hear from them. So yes, very happy, Councilor Di Maria, that you brought that up. But on another note, I'd like to ask my fellow councilors to suspend docket rules this evening, to have a discussion about the incident that happened at the Mount Vernon on 166 Salem Street, which I will speak to in more detail once the suspension of docket rules is granted, if you so desire. So motion to suspend.
So on Councilor Murphy's motion to suspend docket rules for the purposes of discussing the incident that took place at the Mount Vernon, the clerk, please call the roll.
Condon,
Condon, yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Di Maria,
He nodded, Counselor.
Yes.
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Leave it
Murphy.
open.
Murphy, yes.
O'Malley,
O'Malley, yes.
Sika,
Tsige, yes.
Spatafora,
Metaphor, yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson,
Anderson, yes.
And Clerk Lucy, I seconded that for the record.
okay.
Thank you.
So Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that. Obviously, I'm sure you are all aware of the fact that we had an incident, over the weekend at the Mount Vernon, which is located at 166th Street, where the parapet on the front of the building actually let loose and fell to the sidewalk. It was, I'm gonna use the word miracle. Someone might get mad at me for saying that, but I'm actually gonna say it was a miracle that no one was hurt, that no one was walking on the Salem Street sidewalk when that particular portion of the building let loose. And I think the first thing that I just want to say is we are so thankful that we did not have any personal injury that occurred, because it could have been a very different story about what we're talking about this evening. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. And then I wanted to just take a moment, because, our first responders, we hear them, responding to fires and COVID, et cetera, and they've been doing a fabulous job. But I've been working with the building commissioner, the emergency management team, police, and the fire department, all weekend. And they are just an amazing group of men and women who have been on site. They were on site immediately. They made sure that the tenants were safe, the residents were safe, and that the people, in the community were safe. It was, an amazing collaboration of resources to just make sure that our citizens were safe in this crisis that happened. I'm going to call it a little bit of a crisis. So I want to, really want to thank the building commissioner, his staff, emergency management, Lieutenant Cronin, the police department, and the fire department for everything they did to really take that situation in control in a matter of moments and make it safe for everybody. We also wanted to let you all know there's been many comments, obviously, on Facebook. The mayor, Council President Anderson, myself, the building commissioner, and the other groups that we spoke about have been in contact over the weekend constantly, along with United Properties, who has answered every telephone call that we have made. So there has been ongoing, continuous conversations to make sure that all of our residents in that location were housed. We have been in contact with the school department to see if there were children involved at the Forest Hill School. And I want to thank Jackie Ecker, one of our Ward 5 residents, who first brought that to my attention because she wanted them to know if there were Forest Hill families, that the Forest Hill community was there to support them. Thankfully, there were no children from the Forest Hill School. Most of the apartments there are studios or small one-bedrooms. So we really weren't faced with family issues. However, there was one family that was relocated to a hotel that wasn't on a lease. So we're still working to kind of find out where they fall in this whole mix. United Properties has been working diligently to find, and they immediately found temporary housing through hotels for folks, and they are walking through with every resident in a particular building to find them alternative apartments within their properties. And we do have a list that's in our, that Mr. Miller is continually looking at to make sure that we are following up to determine that they are adequately housed. Some folks have decided they just want to break their lease and move on, and that's fine. But we are going to continue to work through the process to make sure that none of the residents in that particular building are without housing, and that they know where they're going to be going in the next few months. As I've posted on Facebook, once the parapet on the side of Mount Vernon Street had been removed, the streets, Salem Street and Mount Vernon Street, were reopened. The sidewalks are closed in both sections, and the parking along those sections have been cordoned off just to prevent any brick from falling if they might. Mr. Miller, we've asked to come before. I've asked myself, the mayor, and Council President Anderson have asked Mr. Miller to come in front of us tonight so that you can ask him questions that he will be able to answer in a more technical manner than I can this evening. But I just want you all to know that as the Ward 5 counselor, seeing our community come together to make sure that we create a safe environment for this particular property it was just amazing. I'm so thrilled to have, witnessed the collaboration and the commitment of everyone who works for the city in making sure that our residents and any residents in the community who might be walking down Salem Street or Mount Vernon Street are safe. So Mr. Miller is here. I am going to turn it over to him because I'm sure you all have a few questions. About what happened at 166 Mount Vernon Street.
Councilor Murphy, hold on just 1 second, please.
Yes.
Greg Lucy, would you pass the host on to me? You're
Sure.
still hosting, please.
Yep. You should be all set.
Okay, I'm now the host. Okay. Building Commissioner Nelson Miller, you have the floor. Tell us what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Murphy, thanks for that summary, and good evening, councilors. Before I answer any questions, if you'll allow me, and thank you for the time tonight. Thanks for adjusting your agenda to fit me in on this. I have a very brief PowerPoint put together to maybe display better visually some of the things we're going to talk about. If you'll allow me to share my screen, and I can
Go right
run
ahead.
through real quick, and then we can field some questions after that.
Great, go right ahead.
See if I can do this right. Am I sharing the right one?
Well, we see your name coming up so far with a blank screen. Here we go. Got it now.
Okay. My computer is a little slow. So as Councilor Murphy said, there was conversation between President Anderson, Councilor Murphy, Mayor Christensen, and myself regarding just putting together some information for you as a council. I've spoken to several of you since Saturday about the situation and different things regarding it, but I thought I'd do my best to try to wrap it up into one neat package of information for you. And really, there's two parts to this. The first thing I'll cover a little bit is the failure itself and what happened and how we reacted to it. And then the second part, I'll talk a little bit about, probably the most common question I've heard so far is, well, what can we do about this? And what can we do about possibly this happening in the future? So first thing is what happened. Well, that's a picture of the building there, and you can see the yellow line hopefully highlighted around the top of the building. That's approximately at the bottom of the parapet. And the parapet wall, which is that top portion of the building, extends above the roof line, approximately 30 inches, maybe a little bit more. It failed. And in failing, it detached from the structure, and portions of it fell, onto the sidewalk below. As Councilor Murphy said, and I'll use the word miracle, it is incredible, in a miracle that no one was down there and no one got hurt. And that's probably the best thing that happened with this whole situation, was that no one was below the building when this took place. So as far as the incident goes, it happened on Saturday at about 12 in the afternoon. I was actually at a fire on Newland Street when I got the call from the fire department, and the call that came in was a building collapse, which got my attention. Luckily, it wasn't an entire building, it was a portion of it. But when I arrived on scene, which was probably not too long after this, the fire department and police department were already on scene, obviously. The property owner, who I called while I was driving over to the scene, had already sent someone on their way. So the property management was on the way and actually arrived there around the same time I did. I have here a video that hopefully you'll be able to see. And this was provided to me from Eric McCush, who's not only on the planning board, but he's part of the management of Weir McCush Funeral Home, which their parking lot obviously is directly across from this building, across Mount Vernon Street. And I'm just going to play this for you. I might have to play it for you more than once. But if you watch this top portion up here.
Oh,
that shows it. So it was sudden, and it was swift. It didn't, pieces didn't fall off slowly and give us any inclination. It went all at once. And you can see that there are a number of vehicles that, again, incredibly got out of the way, or luckily got out of the way before it came crashing down to the street. So, the immediate response priorities, as again, Councilor Murphy mentioned, it's coordinated, between police, fire, and my department. The first thing that we had to do when we got there was to get a safe passage route for the residents out of the building. Because there were pieces falling off of it, there were certain exits that just weren't safe to use. So by going through the building with the fire department and alerting the residents that they had to go and which way they had to go, and establish a route out of the building away from the falling debris, that was really priority number one, not knowing at that time what the extent of the damage to the building was. The next thing was to establish a safe zone around the building for pedestrians and vehicular traffic. That was easy. Police and fire had all of the streets blocked off, so we were able to tape off around the entire area and make sure no one was within that within that zone other than first responders. And then the last thing was to get equipment and contractors on site to bring the remaining portions of the parapet and any other pieces of the facade or bricks that were loose or ready to fall, to bring all that down in a controlled way, as opposed to letting it fall, again, not knowing at that time what condition the rest of the parapet was in, or the roof structure, or the facade. So it was just decided it was better to do it on our own than to wait for it to happen spontaneously. So the ongoing response, and it's been ongoing since Saturday, is really the first issue was the long-term housing for the residents of the building. Initially, the management got everybody into a hotel, not really knowing how long they would be out of the building for. Once some investigation started to take place with the building and there were pieces removed and some of the interior of the building got removed so that we could look up inside ceilings and walls, it was figured out pretty quickly that this would be a long-term thing. The management of the building quickly got on that and started finding more long-term arrangements for the tenants, which is what Councilor Murphy alluded to. They have been communicating with me as far as who's been relocated, who has yet to be relocated, who has decided to move on and go somewhere else. And as that list changes, they'll be providing me updates, and I'll be forwarding that along to Councilor Murphy, so her and her constituents can be aware of that. The next thing that we had to do was maintain a durable, safe zone around the building for pedestrians and vehicles, and that's how you'll see the site right now. The cones and the police tape are nice, but with the amount of time we're going to be working on this building and assessing it, it made more sense to make it a more durable barrier. So you'll see the temporary chain link fence up around the building now to keep anybody from walking in front of it. There is still a possibility that a brick could fall off the facade, and we don't want anybody hanging around inside that zone until the building's repaired. So that fence will be up there for a while. We coordinated with the police department to make sure they were okay with the traffic issues, and they worked with us, and they're happy with the way it looks. The last thing is an independent engineering review of the structural integrity of the building. So that's going on right now. There's a engineer hired by the property owner who has been reviewing the building, and continued demolition has gone on inside the building so that areas can be exposed to see what exactly is going on inside the building, areas that couldn't have possibly be seen until these walls, ceilings, roof areas get opened up and look down inside. So that's going on right now. And what will happen is the engineer will continue his observation as long as he feels necessary, and then put together a report and recommendations on, how do we fix this building, or what has to happen to it. At this point, we have no idea. And the possibility, there is no shortage of possibilities. It could be minor, it could be major. It's too early to tell. So just to give you some quick examples, because a parapet is not a word people use every day. For the last few days we have, but for the most part, people don't know what a parapet is. These are some examples of parapets. You can see here is one that's in really bad shape, mostly brick and mortar. Same thing on the far right, similar brick and mortar, also has somewhat of a lean to it. In the middle here, you see parapets that are a little more modern in style. This one has a metal, that's an aluminum coping or cap on top of it. And this one has more of a clay coping, but there's typically what you see with a parapet is that it's a brick or masonry or a concrete structure of some sort with some form of cap over the top of it. The common problem with all of these is that keeping them waterproof and keeping water from penetrating them because of the nature of what they do. They sit up against roof surfaces. Keeping water out of them is the biggest challenge. And when water penetration is the worst thing for mortar and concrete, it slowly over time, degrades those types of materials. So those are common challenges with all types of parapet walls. Just to show you how they kind of constructed in a modern situation, the building at Salem Street is nothing like this, but this one is the closest, where you have a row of bricks on either side. This has a nicer construction to it, where it has a block interior with some threaded rod. This coping stone is exactly what you would have seen on the Salem Street building. This one on the right is more of a modern style, where it's a masonry wall. There's steel. There is very little steel within the Salem Street building. That building is almost entirely brick and, believe it or not, wood framed. So its construction is antique, to say the best. This is a better representation of what those walls look like on the Salem Street property, and it's called a 3-wythe wall. It's always a fun word to say. 3 wythes just means 3 rows of brick, and you can see here that the 2 interior rows are connected with a perpendicular brick, which connects the two courses. The front course, which is the facade of the building, doesn't have that brick. Typically, what connects the front to the middle is metal ties, small metal ties that go in between the bricks. And unfortunately, what happens to those metal ties over time is they deteriorate and they break, snap, or whatever. So what's the probable reason? Well, we don't know yet. And that's something the engineer is going to tell us exactly what happened, what failed, and why. But it's you can probably bet that water penetration has something to do with it. Those coping stones on the top of the walls are not continuous pieces of stone. They have joints in between them, and water gets between those joints over the course of time and gets down inside the brick. These walls are, especially the type that we're looking at, these are walls that have been built 75 years ago or more. This particular building was built in 1927. So this masonry construction is 94 years old. So the just time itself is not a friend of masonry construction. And lastly, this type of construction, the methods at the time, they're not really, as you saw from those pictures I just showed, the methods at the time obviously weren't as good as the way we build these things today. That being said, even in today's world, in today's construction, sometimes these things fail. It actually happened here in Malden to the Salem Wood School when it was only about 20 years old. Similar type of element on the building collapsed one time or one day without any kind of warning. So it does happen. So talking about inspections and permits a little bit, because there have been a number of people who have asked me about inspections for these buildings, and there's been some questions out there regarding occupancy permits, and there's been some misinformation or misunderstanding about how occupancies are issued. There's really only 3 different ways that an occupancy permit is issued for a building. One is obviously when it's constructed. When it's completed, you get an occupancy permit. If you were to change the use of that building, so if you build it as a single family home and then somewhere along the way you change it to a pizza place, you'd have to issue a new occupancy as a pizza place. Or if for some reason an event happens where the occupancy is revoked. This building is now a good example of that because its occupancy has now been revoked. Once whatever is going to happen to it happens to it, and they complete that process and project, and all the inspections are performed, at the end of that, it would get issued a certificate of occupancy. So there is no other reason to issue an occupancy for a building during its lifetime. It doesn't happen at a transaction. It doesn't happen at the sale. I'm sure most of you have bought a property or a house along your lifetime, and you didn't have to apply for an occupancy when you bought it because they never lost it. These occupancy permit, the inspections that go along with them are kind of tailored towards the reason you're getting the occupancy. The inspections for a new building are obviously the full gamut of inspections that go along with construction. At a change of use, it would depend on how much work is done to the building. You could have a total reconstruction for a change of use, or it could be minor, depending on what you're changing it to. So sometimes an occupancy inspection is just a life safety inspection where you're looking at exit signs and emergency lights and safe egress, and other times you're looking at everything that was done in a construction project. But what's never done is any kind of destructive or invasive inspections of a building. That's never performed at a occupancy inspection. You're always observing what it is you can see and what's been revealed to you. Sometimes this says that a building advertises that it's sick. And I've used this example with a few people over the last couple of days, trying to compare a building to a person. And you know, sometimes a person gets sick and shows symptoms and we figure out that they have a health problem. And sometimes they just drop dead. Well, the buildings can do the same thing. And we actually have two examples of this in the city. And one's very recent that many of you probably, I would think, remember. And that's 1 Salem Street, the building that was just torn down at the corner of Ferry, Salem, Maine. That building, a large chunk of that facade fell off, a chunk about the size of me. The only difference was it happened at about 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday when I got the call. And that chunk of building falling off told us, hey, there's a problem here. And what led us to do was order the property owner to get an engineer in and do an evaluation. Now, what the engineer did for his evaluation was entirely up to him. And what he decided to do was cut holes into different portions of the building on different floors, ceilings, and walls, look at the interior of the building and see what was going on, and make a determination. And his determination was that that building was unsafe to the point where it could collapse. So that's an example of a building that showed us symptoms and gave us the opportunity to try to treat it. This building is different. You know, nothing fell off the front of it, and then all of us, you know, gave us a symptom that there was something going on. It was more of a sudden collapse. In the parapet itself, actually, I was up on the roof, obviously, when I got there, and the portion of the parapet along Mount Vernon Street, looking at it from the roof, looked fine. You wouldn't have looked at it and thought there was anything wrong with it. Interestingly enough, when the contractor was there and started to take it down, it came apart like a pile of sand. It didn't come apart in chunks. It came apart in dust. So sometimes these things aren't always visually able to be detected. So that brings us to our next steps. In what can we do? So here's what I'm proposing. Step 1 would be to engage a third-party contractor to assist with targeted review of potential problem properties with similar construction characteristics. For example, buildings that have these types of parapet walls. We would have to inventory the properties with similar parapets. There could be put likely over 100. There's probably could be hundreds of these types of buildings. But the only way to know is to literally drive around and create an inventory. There are no records within the city which have that level of detail for how a building is constructed. So we can't reference assessor's records or building department records. We actually have to go out and find them. What we can then do is contact the property owners and arrange for a visual inspection, meaning allow us to get up on their roof and take a look at it. And that would involve some kind of waiver form from us that we'd have to develop. And then what we could do is notify these owners of the concerns that we have. And if necessary, tell them they have to, engage an engineer to do a further evaluation, similar to what we did with 1 Salem Street, and let them tell us what the appropriate action is, because that's really the way this works in inspectional services world, is we engage registered design professionals to make recommendations to us. We don't tell them what to do. We tell them if what they're going to do makes sense. And then what we would do as a department is we track and follow up with the owners and make sure that whatever recommendations were provided by their professionals that they're following through on. So immediately, how do we do this? Well, we'd have to solicit quotes. We'd have to get some staff in to do this, subcontractor type staff, and these would have to be licensed building inspectors. Those are the only people who could really put their eyes on a building, recognize an issue, and then request a further inspection from a professional. In speaking with the mayor and obviously President Anderson and Councilor Murphy, who's as you know, your finance chairman, there's a commitment to send down an appropriation to fund this with an estimate of $75,000. That's entirely an estimate, again, because we have no idea how many properties there are. But if we want to take a stab at 100 of them at $750 an inspection, then that's probably the number we're looking at. And then those documents, we could document those findings, report back, our initial report, and then subsequent reports, so that we know that whatever recommendations were made were being followed through with. And realistically, to come up with this list, for lack of a better term, of properties that we want to address, we're probably looking at probably 90 days for someone to be able to survey all the relevant properties in the city and come up with a list of concerns. So that's all I have for you in the way of a presentation. I was hoping to be short and to the point with it.
Well, I think you were short and to the point. That was a fine presentation, and I'm glad to see that you've got some recommendations for us. I know that that's been on the back of my mind about how to, having talked with you and know that that wasn't something that we wouldn't have known was going to happen by the regular process that anyone's going through currently for inspection. But we've got a lot of buildings around. You say 100 buildings around, maybe that would be a good number to start with by having some look. What would we be asking the third party inspector to do? I mean, how would they inspect the building? I'm asking the question because I heard you say that when you were up on that building on 166 Salem Street and you looked at the parapet from the roof, when you looked at it from the Mount Vernon Street side, you wouldn't have been able to see any default in the masonry. So what is it that we would expect the third party engineers to be looking for to tell us that the building is unsafe?
That's a fantastic, right. That's a fantastic question. And the reality is we wouldn't be able to see all of them that have issues, but we would be able to see some that have some of these symptoms, as I've called them. Those pictures I showed you of the different types of parapets were good examples. The two on the ends, you don't need to be a building inspector to look at that and say, hey, that might fall over. And we very well may have some of those in the city. Honestly, I don't know. We'd have to go out and find them. So we would definitely pick some of that low-hanging fruit, the ones you look at that are obvious from the street that they have some kind of issue. And then possibly with a closer inspection, getting up on a roof, taking a look at them. Again, we can't do any destructive inspections. We can't start taking things apart. That's not within our purview. But we may be able to see some that we may feel have some suspect qualities, and then tell the property owner, get a mason in and look at it, get an engineer in and look at it, whatever we feel is relevant. So it would really be a case-by-case scenario. And I would think that with the volume of buildings we have in the city, I mean, we have about 13,300 properties within the city. So 100 could be a very, very low ball guess, to be honest with you. But, I'm sure we have enough properties where we could identify right off the bat some real quick and easy low hanging fruit, and then maybe get lucky in seeing some other small issues that we can then, get further investigated.
It would seem to me we'd want to start with similar situated buildings. We'd want to start with the buildings that are the same vintage of what this building was. This building, you say 94 years old, that this 94 years, this building, we've got a lot of old buildings. Seems to me that would, as we put our priority list together of what we'd be looking for, we'd be looking for brick buildings. We'd be looking for brick buildings of that vintage. And so let me go back to a number of hands have raised, but Councilor Murphy, you still have the floor. If you'll unmute.
I am. Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Mr. Miller. This has been a very trying weekend for everybody, and I appreciate you putting together this PowerPoint presentation to share with all of the councilors. I agree with Councilor Anderson. We do have, and I think all of us councilors are probably looking around as we drive through our ward. I know I did over the weekend, and kind of looked at another apartment building and was like, okay, that looks old. So I do think that, you know, and we can bring this to finance, you know, in a future week, but I do think maybe allocating some funds to have a consultant come in and actually kind of go through the city and look at the different structures that exist in each ward that are of that same vintage as Council President Anderson had mentioned. And not just that size, but you know, there are 1- and 2-story buildings that still have these same problems, and kind of just at least start to look at this particular type of issue that we will be facing as we, as just a community who've been here from, you know, the 1600s, will face as different construction methods start to fail due to, you know, weather and rain, snow, etc. I know that our building commissioner, you know, would say, you know, you know, one of the reasons that the occupancy has been revoked in that building is once they were able to open it up, which is very invasive. It's, you know, when you think of surgery on a person, we're talking about surgery in a building to sometimes see about the, you know, what is actually going on with the inner workings. You know, it was once the surgery was performed at 166 Salem Street that they really got an eye opening into the actual, you know, roof construction. The construction was fine when it was built, but you know, what has happened to it over the years. So, you know, I think, you know, this is something that we need to be abreast of. And, you know, I would like to see the mayor's request for that $75,000 come down to the finance committee so we can discuss that there and, you know, make some movement to making sure that the premises that many of our residents occupy, you know, as residential buildings are safe.
Thank you, Councilor. Got a number of hands up. Councilor O'Malley?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me all right? Great. Nelson, thank you very much for that presentation. You know, I found the age of the building very interesting. It's, you know, 94 years old, not even 100 years old. And, you know, and you made a great connection to 1 Salem Street, you know, which we were all very sad to see that beautiful building taken down. But you know, the fact that the facade of that building was crumbling and falling to the street really kind of hastens the need for not only the city but the property owner to make sure that we didn't have any liability or any dangerousness when it came to that. So I think that was a great connection. When it comes to this inspection, what happens if a property owner refuses access? You know, I think that sometimes a lot of these properties are owned by problem property owners. What happens if you have someone that's just kind of like, you know, a little bit slimy and doesn't want to give you access?
That's a great question, Councilor O'Malley. So the state building code is what governs inspections of buildings. It's not something that we as a municipality can mess with, right? It's state law. And so I have certain abilities to require inspections if I feel that there is some violation or nonconformity with the building code. Now, that doesn't mean I can enter your house, just kick the door in, but I can write you violations for not allowing us to enter the property. And if I feel it is truly a life safety issue to the public or to the people inside the building, you know, I have the ability to get a warrant and go inside. So it generally doesn't get to that point. I've probably performed maybe 5 or 6 administrative warrants since I've been here with the city in the last just, you know, over 4 years. So typically by pressing the issue, we get in, but eventually they would have to let us in.
Okay. Do you think the city would have any liability if we were to say inspect a parapet of a building and not have a problem with it? Like say we do a visual inspection, or the person we hire does a visual inspection and we give it an okay, but then for some reason it falls over in a snowstorm. Does any liability then come on us because we've inspected it?
No. So the building code, again, and the state laws which surround our building code are very specific in liability for inspectors. And there's a very good reason for that. If we, as a group of building officials, were could be held liable for not seeing something, nobody would do this job. We'd all get sued on a daily basis. So we enjoy the luxury of administrative immunity on certain things. Now, that doesn't mean that we want to be wrong, but it does mean that if we look at something today and we thought it was okay and it falls down tomorrow, that's not our fault. You know, we didn't see it or didn't perceive it that way. But,
Okay.
but that doesn't make us feel any better if we're wrong. We still want to be right, and we don't want someone to get hurt, you know.
I know, absolutely. I'm just trying to think through all the different options here in terms of how things could go. This wouldn't be covered in apartment inspections. I know we have an ordinance that says that apartments have to be inspected, you know, every time you're going to rent it to a new individual. This wouldn't have been captured in something like that.
No, it would not. No.
And then I think this is the same owner as United Properties, as like 2 Webster Street. You know, that they had a pretty substantial issue that involved the entire building having to be evacuated. Completely unrelated, or just is it deferred maintenance on a number of these buildings, or?
It was a totally different type of issue. They actually had a roof drain which became uncoupled within the building. It's a drain that runs through the inside of the building, not the outside, which many tall buildings have. And it came disconnected, uncoupled, or however, inside the building. And then with a major rainstorm, it flooded the building. So a totally different type of issue. But you're correct. We did also have to evacuate that building, and you know, there's just finishing it up now.
Yeah, the only reason I mention it is because I'm not. There seems to be a pattern with these buildings, or it could be the buildings, but it could also be the ownership. It's not quite clear at this point, but there seems to be, you know, maybe it's the type of buildings they're investing in that they're having a lot of these, you know, substantial failures that result in the buildings being, you know, unable to be occupied. And there wasn't any evidence that, or at least we haven't come across any evidence that the property owner already knew about this issue.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Thank you so much for your help. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lenahan?
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me okay? Okay,
We can.
great. Sorry, I had audio issues during the committee meeting. I really want to thank Counselor Murphy for, you know, bringing this to us and inviting Nelson to come in. That presentation was extraordinarily helpful. I actually happened to be in the area over the weekend visiting a friend outdoors and had a chance to see the aftermath of it. It was really startling. But I also could see, you know, a huge turnout of force of our public safety and counselors and Mr. Miller. And, you know, definitely seems like it's being addressed as expediently as possible. I guess, you know, I'm definitely supportive of having a discussion about whatever funding we need to do the inspections. I think that's a really good next step. You know, I think as a counselor, as a ward counselor, it's so frustrating to see this kind of thing happen because I look to the apartment buildings, particularly those owned by this property manager in my ward, and all I hear from residents is just this pattern of not getting regular maintenance issues addressed. And you feel really powerless. You know, I know, Nelson, you and I talk a lot. If there's issues that come up, you or one of your people goes out right away if there's an issue that needs to be looked at. So I don't in any way mean to imply that the city's not responsive when we hear about potential safety concerns, but it's more that slow trickle of like, there's a leak in my roof, or my, you know, the door is stuck, or the heat isn't working, or things like that, that are just over time, it just gets so tiresome to hear about these buildings getting acquired by the same 1 or 2 property owners. The rent goes up, the maintenance issues are not addressed. And then, you know, I'm not an engineer, but it's frustrating to see something really big like this occur. It's not a big stretch to feel like maybe those smaller issues add up to not a very good maintenance plan overall. So, you know, I understand this is not something anybody could have seen coming, but at the same time, I feel really responsible for trying to protect the residents that I represent that do live in similar properties. So I'm really glad to hear that there is a plan to do that. Fully supportive of hearing that in finance or however it comes down to us. And I want to thank you both Councilor Murphy and Nelson and the mayor for taking this so seriously. But you know, the only question I did have that a lot of my residents have asked is there a way to help those tenants that are displaced? People are asking me if there's either, you know, like a fund or anything that's needed. If there's anything like that, I've had folks asking me, so I'd love to know about that as well.
I don't want to put Councilor Murphy on the spot, but I've told her that those lists that I'm getting from the property owner, I thought the best thing to do was to forward those along to her, it being her ward. And then, and I think she's in contact, like she had said, with people from the school and so forth and so on, you know, to deal. But I'm not aware of anything that's been put together yet.
Thank you, Mr. President, if you don't mind if I jump in here.
You want to respond to Councilor Lenahan's question?
I do.
Go ahead.
Yes, Councilor Linehan, you know, we've had an outreach from Ward 5 community wanting to help where need is needed. To date, you know, we haven't heard of anything that needs to be done. United Properties has stepped up to the plate as far as I'm concerned. They're giving us daily updates on what is going on with the tenants. I think one of the things, and Mr. Miller can comment on this, which is, you know, actually kind of a blessing in disguise, is that this apartment building is mostly studios in small 1-bedrooms, which I think I reiterated a little bit earlier this evening. So we're not really faced with family issues. That does not mean that somebody who is, you know, an elder does not need help, or, you know, or even a middle-aged person. But we are open to receiving any, you know, requests from anybody that lived in those apartments in any way that we as a city can help them. And we will certainly work towards you know, meeting their needs. But I will tell you that both the mayor and myself, you know, we've been talking about United Properties. It's owned by Andreas Cedos. Both the mayor and myself contacted him, and he is not in Massachusetts at the moment dealing with a family issue, and he has picked up the phone every time we have called him. So he is being very responsive. His staff is being responsive. They're very open to any request I've had. I called, you know, to find out were there any children there. Because I did get a request from, you know, someone in Forest Hill School Families. The Forest Hill family is there to help. So, you know, we are all working in collaboration to make sure that these families have everything that they need, and we will continue to do so. And that is, you know, it's between the Emergency Management Center, the building commissioner, the mayor's office, myself, and President Council Anderson. We're on this. So, and you know, if we find someone that does need help, we certainly will reach out to yourself, Councilor Linehan, and all the people who call you to help with it, whatever might be needed.
Yeah, the thing I would just add to that, if I may, councilors, is that these properties that that we're concerned about, some of these older properties that you may say have building issues, are not properties that the current owner has built. These are properties that were built years ago, and this company has purchased them, like the one there at 166, built 94 years ago. I don't know how long ago United Properties may have purchased the building, but if they were just building at that location, we'd probably have it built differently. We'd probably have it built in a way that Nelson was pointing out, those parapets that would have a lot more steel in there and not just the mortar that's holding those bricks together. So let's go to Councilor Winslow next. Councilor Winslow, you have the floor.
Thank you, and I appreciate Nelson and Councilor Murphy and our you know, police, fire, and all our staff for really being on it. You know, and making sure everything's safe and the residents are taken care of, and we're in close contact with the landowner. So just, you know, going forward, I had a question for Nelson. Do you, between the building code and any ordinances in the city, do you think you have the authority necessary to do the inspections that you're talking about doing and asking to be done. Do you think you need any more authority on that front? I mean, I know just by example, we worked together on the barbed wire ordinance because it wasn't clear how we could inspect that. So do you feel like a building, do you need any ordinance support to help support this?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I don't. Like I said, the inspectional process is well-defined in the building code and strictly governed by the building code, meaning we can't sway from it. I don't get any creativity with it. So when it comes to buildings, I have a very strict and well-defined set of rules. The barbed wire was a little bit tougher because that's an ordinance kind of thing, because there's no building code regarding barbed wire. So that's kind of the difference between the two. So the short answer is, yeah, we have all the tools we need to force these inspections. That's the easy part. The harder part is finding out where we want to inspect.
So just on inspections, I mean, are there, I know like for, environmental assessments, there's ground penetrating radar. Are there any techniques like that, or even use of drones to help with that inspection, sort of modern techniques that we might have to apply that, just curious on that front.
I called Chuck Rannigan Monday morning and asked for a drone. He said no. So I don't know if that's going to happen.
All right.
Okay. No, I don't think so. The way inspections work, the building official has the authority to request an inspection if they see something that they feel is in violation of the building code. What we then have the authority to do is require the property owner to bring in a professional in whatever thing it is we're talking about. Bring in a professional to give us their evaluation of what they think is wrong, and then what the further steps should be from there. So on things like this, that's really what we would be looking to do. We'd be looking to see what we can evaluate, what we can see we think we have an issue with, and then make the property owner address it from there.
So now, just on the maybe $750 per building, are we able to actually impose that kind of fee on building owners, or over and above? Is that something that could be part of the paper coming down, that we would, add a financial fee for that? Is that something we can do?
So fees, when it comes to fees, those are firmly in the municipality's purview. The state and the building code does not get involved in that. So if the city council wanted to establish a fee for these particular types of inspections, we could do that. There's truly no program that I'm aware of in the state like this. I couldn't go to another municipality and say, hey, how do you guys find and inspect parapets? No one does it. So we would truly be kind of, chartering our own course on this thing, and a fee is something we could create if you felt it was necessary.
So that was going to be one of my questions is, a lot of times, I'm certainly there probably are a lot of cities situated like this, same age of buildings, from the 1890s, 1930s. So that's interesting that there hasn't been a city that's set up something like this. I mean, I know sometimes there's building collapses in New York and that type of thing that happened. And I think that's why we were so concerned about one Salem. So I mean, to the extent that, this may not be something that we can just do once. It may be something that we should be doing on, 20% of the buildings every 5 years. So maybe we do a crash program, but maybe it's something we have to build into what our inspectional services department does. So it's something to think about after kind of the crisis. But, these buildings are going to need regular, some inspections. It's not going to go away, just once. So just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Spatafora.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I do want to start off where Councilor Murphy started. I was actually in my yard when I saw the news article come across my phone, and the first thing I thought is how anybody who's traveled down that street, especially on a Saturday morning when it was nice out, how nobody was in that area. I think there's a bus stop right there, not that far from there. It's a very active area. There's a lot of people sitting in the house next door. How nobody was hurt is a miracle, to say the least. So I think my focus on the first thing is going to say, thank God there was nobody there. There was no loss of life because it would be a different conversation and certainly a different tone. A couple of things I do want to make mention about. We do have older housing stock, and that's certainly a reflective in terms of our apartment buildings as well. But I do want to remind some of the councilors. I remember Linden had a similar issue where a chunk of that roof, which is probably 25 years old, 30 years old, had a similar issue where poor design or just weathering, and that chunk fell off too. So I don't think it's just the older buildings you have to be looking at. Like Councilor Winslow just noted, yeah, we could do this extensive review, but at the end of the day, we got to probably do it again next year. And I think to Mr. Miller's point, and if I'm speaking out of tone, Mr. Miller, just tell me, it's all visual. It's not, you don't have the ability to go in there and rip the roof apart or look under the rafters to see if it really is coming apart. I happened to be somewhere Sunday, and I was talking to actually an Everett fireman, and he said, Craig, this is a real danger that we face all the time, because some of these older buildings that have this, design, the parapet, they're all masonry and they're all stonework, and they were a lot more creative back in the day with the craftsmanship. He says, when you go to these buildings for fires, that is our biggest fear. We put a ladder up there, and that comes crashing down as you're going up there. And he made note, if you look at some of these buildings, they have these usually designed, usually stars, and those are metal rods that actually go through the building that are holding up the outside layer of brick so it doesn't fall down. So the reason why I mention all this is an issue that is not certainly going away. It is susceptible to all our buildings, right? Including city buildings that were not built no more than 30 years ago. So I think Councilor Linehan made a great point, is if there's a way we can find some funding to at least allow either Nelson and his team or hire an outside consultant. But this is not going to be a one size fits all. This will be a journey. And we certainly have to go through and look at all these buildings and including smaller buildings. I happen to own a piece of property on Main Street that was an old variety store. And when we did the roof over, the reason why I knew what a parapet was when we got the price to do that storefront over, the roof, they told me it was this amount of money, and they called me up and said, the parapet's going to rot and you got to replace it. And I said, what's a parapet? What's a parapet? And they explained to me what it was. And this exactly what Nelson said. It was a stone top. The water got underneath it, cracked it, and started to pull away. So when we replaced it, we used, pressure treated wood in a metal top. But it's just not, a 5-story building. This is a 1-story building that, if that fell on somebody walking down the street, would have the same impact, as a severity on that individual that would happen with that coming crashing down. So I do want to just make light. It's certainly an important topic. Mr. Miller, fantastic presentation, maybe the best presentation I've ever seen a building inspector give. Certainly not the way we want to see a presentation like this, but I'm confident that you understand the challenge, and I think the council will certainly find some funding in the short term to help us maybe address some of the buildings that we know may have an immediate need. But I just think that the statement I heard too, the concern I have, and Councilor Malley made a great point, was, hey, even if Mr. Miller goes out there and looks at it today, tomorrow that could fall over. It's almost like the fire department coming and doing an inspection. It doesn't mean there's not going to be a fire tomorrow. So I think it's important we do look at the older buildings and get out there, and certainly willing to help financially support that. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. President, excuse me, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Crowe.
Thank you, Mr. President. And yeah, thank you, Nelson, for a very informative, presentation. And boy, that video, I mean, you knew what happened, but that was really very jarring. So I'm glad you didn't show it a couple of times. So as we're talking about, in your budget, do you have any funds that we could start this process right now? And then as we're waiting for either the paper to come down from the mayor, I know that Councilor Murphy will move that as quickly as possible, but so that we can, knowing that just the evaluation of who we're going to be looking at could take 90 days. Is there something that we could be doing sort of right now? You could be starting right now as we're either crafting some ordinances, or even if it's a fee schedule, or waiting for the paper from the mayor to begin the deeper dive.
Yeah, so that's something I I didn't look at, so I don't have a solid answer for you.
Right.
I do obviously have different line items within my budget, which can be spent on different things. And one of them is for subcontractors, which is, if I have a staff member who's out sick, I can't just have anybody take that person's place unless they happen to be a licensed building inspector, plumbing inspector, or electrical inspector. So I have to bring in outside people to do that. And I have a line item, to pay those people to do that. So I could possibly, tap into that. That's something I could obviously speak to the mayor and Chuck Rannigan about and see what their thoughts are on that. To get going on it
We would
sooner than later.
punish those, with the funds with the mayor sends down, but, to get the process started, I think, the sooner the better.
Councilor Crowe,
Yeah.
if I can jump in and say, Nelson told us he's talked with the mayor, and the mayor is already committed to sending 75 grand down. It's obvious that we all want this to happen. So the short answer to that is we could move this. We know this is something that we need to move on. We could move this very quickly. Whether you have it currently in your budget or not doesn't make any difference because it's coming down and we're going to support it. So I would say, let's get right on it. Let's get right on it.
Let's get right on it.
All right.
But thank
Councilor
you.
Crowe, anything else?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
You all set? Okay. Councilor DeMaria?
Thank you, Mr. President.
That's
and
right,
Nelson-
Mr. President.
I said it right. I
There
didn't
you
think
go.
about it. Nelson, great presentation. I know you and I chatted several times over the weekend. That was so amazing for someone I'm not a builder, but you did such a great job. I think not just the parapets that I'm concerned about with this wake-up call, but there's so many older buildings with decorative facades and corbels and whatever on these buildings. It has to be a priority. Maintenance is something that, we put up these buildings, we resell them and sell them again. And I do think that inspection, maybe compliance inspection on an annual basis for our properties is something we might want to think about. It's like going to the doctor, an annual checkup. So I know that's overtaxing your department and a lot of the owners of properties in the city, but I do think it's something that should be on our radar because this really wasn't, it's a miracle, but it was a blessing that no one got hurt. So it's a wake-up call, and I know you know that. I'm preaching to the choir, and I just want to say thank you to all the first responders that were there, and to the mayor, and truly all hands on deck, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Murphy for the third time.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to wrap this discussion up, seeing as how it's been my life for the last 72 hours. I appreciate all the council's support this evening. As I said earlier, I think the mayor's suggestion of allocating $75,000 to the building commissioner to be able to bring in a consultant is something that is much needed, not just for Ward 5, where the incident occurred, but also for the entire city, because we do have, as we, I guess, would like to call them, and probably great vintage buildings. We do know that they are made of brick and mortar, which does, have an issue with rain and deterioration that's associated with that. I think we all need to know and not, think that the building commissioner can he's not Superman. He doesn't have, vision that can see through buildings. And as he said earlier, it's not until the actual interior of the building has been cut through to actually look at the bones that sometimes you can determine what is going to happen to that building. One Salem Street gave us some indication as a fever or a cold would give when you went to a doctor, but that's not always the case. And even though he might go out and inspect a building of this vintage age, that inspection might not reveal anything until the actual patient is opened up. So there's a lot for us to think about this, but as I said earlier, the building commissioner, the mayor, Council President Anderson and I have been in contact all weekend. We've been trying to figure out how to deal with these issues. And I think the $75,000 that is mentioned this evening is the first step in the city council giving our building commissioner some immediate funds to deal with how we move forward with our vintage age problems. So I would hope when the paper comes down to finance, I would find all of you in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, I don't see any other hands. I think we've covered that pretty well. Thank you, Mr. Building Commissioner Nelson Miller, and let us move on to the next order of business. Next order of business.
So we have public comment. I do have 5 emails, and there's a couple people that indicated they may sign in and go on the Zoom to say it. So the first one is it's from it says, "Hello, Barbara. I would like to," she sent this originally to Councilor Murphy. "I would like to voice my objection to the proposed changes to our city streets with regard to installing bicycle/bus lanes with traffic calming in mind. Traffic maddening, maybe. I don't usually reach out to a representative, but I see this as just a total mess. Working in downtown Malden and going to and from my home to work in morning, lunchtime, evening, I have rarely seen a bicycle travel that route. The charter school's not even in full capacity in relation to the gym on Eastern Ave, but when it is, there will be an increased bottleneck leaving Malden Center and the crawling along Eastern Ave towards Route 1 every evening. Reverse that for the morning commute. This proposal is going to make it even worse with no apparent benefit to anybody. I'm not even sure how many buses use that route. Main Street and Salem Street are bad enough as is. Add in any changes in traffic, it's going to be horrific. Again, how many bikes do you see in use per day, particularly during commuting times? Anyway, that's my gripe. I just wanted to say something about it. Not sure what can be done to change the course of the decision. Thank you for listening. Ann Warren, 78 Rutland Street, Malden, Mass. Mr. Lucy, I'm out of town at the time of next week's council meeting, or else I would be participating in the public comment on the resolution supporting the redesign of Center Street that, in my opinion, would improve that busy street for everyone who uses it, pedestrians, cyclists, bus riders, and car drivers. My wife and I have been residents in Malden since 2001 and bus, subway, and carpool commuting for that time. We were very impressed at the online presentation Councilor O'Malley gave recently. The depth of the planning proposal was very impressive. Results from other areas that implemented such redesigns are overwhelmingly positive. I think it's time for Malden to take advantage of some of the forward thinking that has benefited other communities. Maldonians deserve it. I very strongly encourage you and all councils to support this resolution. Thank you, Paul Sherman, 284 Ferry Street. Dear council members, I'm writing to voice my opposition to the proposal during the March 30, 2021 council meeting to prohibit motorists from using half of Route 60. Route 60 is the major artery for Maldonians to get to and from work, as well as for visitors who come to our city and to work, shop, and eat. The road is already poorly maintained and badly congested at rush hour. Shrinking it to half its size will cause even further chaos. The term traffic signal prioritization sounds wholesome and wonderful, but it is dishonest and misleading and was probably written this way intentionally. If the authors are so proud of the proposal, they should give it a more transparent name and let it stand on or fall on its own merits. A Maldonian might mistakenly assume that the proposal is to finally synchronize our outdated maze of traffic lights, but it's not about that at all. The real intent is to punish people who use cars in Malden by making their commute worse. The authors even used the COVID-19 pandemic as a weapon to get their wishes. The authors claim that a dedicated bus lane is needed to support social distancing among bus riders. Americans are getting vaccinated at a rate of more than 1 million per day, and the pandemic will soon be a thing of the past, but the special bus lanes will be with us forever. I strongly urge all councils to vote against the misleading, misguided proposal. Sincerely, Christopher Gennaro Luongo. To members of the City Council. Esteemed members of the Malden City Council, I write this letter today to express adamant opposition to paper number 144-21, sponsored by Council O'Malley and Council Winslow. Although I am cognizant of the constant need to upgrade traffic lights anytime we can, and we should citywide. And I'm also in agreement that this should always be looking at ways to ease the traffic burden on our residents in an already congested downtown area, as well as the community as a whole. But this needs to be a pragmatic approach. The community deserves nothing less. The fact that we are addressing the needs of the MBTA over common sense is very troubling to me. I well know the need of our residents that use the MBTA, as I have many friends that use it to commute to work daily. But that being said, this proposal to add lane diets to the areas would become an atrocity to the city of Malden. Asking the city council to impact 95% of the traffic flow to appease the 5% of the folks that use the MBTA is a knee-jerk reaction. Ridership on the ever overspending transportation service is at an all-time low, and I really cannot see it coming back to what it once was in these trying times. Furthermore, compound that with the seemingly constant shutdown in the square area due to construction of all sorts. This is a lose-lose for the city as a whole, but more importantly, the residents who live downtown. And my family is right in the heart of it. You can use today as a prime example. Main Street heading north has been closed down daily. Exchange Street was closed down due to a crane set up on the Main Street end. Salem Street closed down at Mount Vernon due to a building facade collapse, et cetera, et cetera. I could spend an hour going on about the pros and cons about the idea, but the cons far outweigh the pros to the benefit of the community. If I were at the public meeting, not Zoom, I'm sure you would see a strong contingent of residents opposed to this. And I'm sure once those start happening again, you will see that. In closing, I will ask you to think outside the box on this and realistically think about what it would be like for the constituents at the end at this end of the city. I have a faith that the majority of the leadership in this fine city will see this as an extremely bad idea, and I humbly ask you to deny this resolve. It is bad for the community. Thank you for your time and consideration on this matter, and I also ask you that you read this into the minutes. With warm regards, Jeff Donahue, 56 Tremont Street, Ward 4. Dear Mr. Lucy, please include my public comment as follows during the 3/30/21 council meeting. Thank you. D. Campbell, 17 Chester Street. Dear councilors, my name is D. Campbell Tompkins. As a Ward 2 resident of 17 Chester Street, around the corner from Center Street, I speak in favor of the Center Street traffic signal prioritization and bus route plan. I attended the public hearing during which the opportunity to apply for a $1 million grant and a detailed plan was presented. I'm strongly in favor of pursuing any funding source for our gateway environmental justice city that supports a project that increases the efficiency and safety of a heavily traveled corridor such as Center Street. The very detailed plan to be made possibly by the grant results in more safe choices and benefits citizens of Malden using all modes of transportation. Many thanks to Council O'Malley and Winslow for their initiative. Thank you for this opportunity for public comment.
That's it? Thank you.
That's the emails, Council President, and there's two people that had indicated on the Zoom.
Okay,
There's a Barbara Kim and
they should be attendees that they've asked to
yeah.
speak.
Barbara Kim and a Virginia Rose,
Let me see.
Virginia Rosen.
Okay, yep. Barbara Kim, you are allowed to speak.
Hi, thank you, Council President. Thank you, councilors, for giving me this opportunity to speak. I just want to say quickly that I am in full support of this project. The corridor that we were speaking about on Center Street to 60th Street is a textbook example of self-inflicted traffic congestion. The number one source is due to light timing. The second is that there is a bottleneck that occurs because this corridor goes from 1 lane to 2 travel lanes back down to 1 travel lane. And so by making one of the travel lanes a dedicated bus lane, you remove that bottleneck. In addition, there is a ripple effect as cars get stuck behind buses while that stops, and while buses pull into the travel lanes, that would be removed by having a dedicated bus lane. In addition, there is streamlined car movement that provides better road guidance. The outcome of this project will increase the average speed of people traveling down this corridor while reducing peak speed. It will improve transit times for bus riders. It will be safer for pedestrians and cyclists. There is no data or evidence that will make this corridor worse by implementing, and there are successful projects around the Commonwealth, including in Arlington and Cambridge, that demonstrate projects almost identical to this do not make it worse for motorists while making a better environment for everybody else. So I, again, am fully support of this project, and I thank you for giving me this time to speak. Thank you, President, Council Anderson.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
We have another hand raised to speak. Is that Cecile Doucette? Cecilia Doucette? You are live to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Cecilia Doucette from Ashland, Massachusetts, and I'm the Director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and I was asked to speak by one of your constituents tonight, and she will be speaking shortly as well. This is regarding agenda item number 8, 142-21, regarding the Verizon small cell antenna applications. And unfortunately, all of today's wireless technology came to market with no pre-market safety testing. And we now have literally thousands of studies all over the world indicating there is very grave biological harm from the electromagnetic fields of radio frequency that are emitted constantly by today's wireless technology. The FCC is being sued for ignoring the science. The courts are expected to rule in the next 4 to 6 months. Other towns in Massachusetts have already begun to address this and begun putting into place small cell policies that, within the constraints of the law that the FCC and the industry set up, there are still ways to protect our communities to keep distance from these small cell antennas. And at 5gcrisis.com, there's a sample ordinance that your legal team may wish to take a look at. Senate President Spilka introduced a bill on my behalf several years ago to begin addressing all of the wireless radiation emissions. And just last November, the state of New Hampshire issued a groundbreaking report calling out the conflicts of interest with the FDA, the FCC, and the wireless industry. And they have a report that makes 15 recommendations to start transitioning our communities to safe, hardwired fiber optic technology to the premises without all of these small cell nodes that the industry is forcing into our neighborhoods. There are also serious liability concerns for all of our towns. Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, AM Best, and others have already recognized radio frequency as a leading risk and put exclusions in their policies. So that could leave Malden vulnerable to legal damages should people get harmed from this wireless radio frequency. And we also may wish to speak with Mr. Miller, because there's an expert up in Canada who consults with governments all over the world. And he's saying that this close range radio frequency has great potential to compromise our building structures because of the vibrational frequency now coming in at close range. So I will be giving a presentation next Tuesday evening, and I will go ahead and send out the invitation when it's prepared tomorrow. And I would strongly encourage citizens as well as your municipal leaders to attend one of these sessions and really start learning what's happening behind the scenes, because we don't get true investigative reporting through mainstream media because the industry influence prohibits that from getting to the public. So there's a lot of really good things happening behind the scenes, but most of us, like I was, are in the dark on this. And I've helped Ashland Public Schools become the first in the United States to start taking precautionary measures. I was also an invited guest speaker at the recent International Electromagnetic Fields Medical Conference, because our doctors, our nurses, our first responders are in great need of training to recognize, diagnose, treat, and most importantly, prevent these microwave sicknesses. So thank you for your time and consideration. And I look forward to hopefully having some of you join us next week when we do a more informative forum on this issue. But for today, I would strongly encourage you to delay as long as you can approving any more wireless infrastructure until the courts rule on this, because once you put it up, it's really hard to get it taken down. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Well, I think we have one other hand up. I see the letter. Thought I saw something that says DAPS, DAPS. No, whoever that is. Who is DAPS?
Hello, can you hear me?
Wait a minute, just one moment. Hold on a second, please.
Hi, Councilor Anderson, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay, sorry, this is David A. Senatilica.
Your address, please?
Yes, Perkins Avenue, Malden, Massachusetts, Ward 1, Precinct 2.
Go right ahead, sir.
Sorry, is the video function enabled for me or no? Just the audio.
Just the audio.
Okay, that's fine.
Just the audio, okay.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, I just like to speak in full support of the Winter Shared Streets and Space program on commercial streets. I'm actually on the T right now, so that's I'm coming home from I just got done with some work and then donating blood at the Children's Hospital, so I'm taking the Orange Line home. You know, I think it's really crazy for the city to potentially turn away this free money that MassDOT is offering through the grants. All the surrounding cities have taken advantage of this. Everett, Somerville, Arlington. I think I read in the paper that is recently, last week, Wakefield was granted Winter Shared Street and Space program. You know, this is going to be a dedicated lane for bus, bike, but also emergency vehicles. And I think that's a piece that's often neglected. I mean, this is something that's going to allow ambulance, fire, police to get from one end of Center Street to the other to make that turning radius and not have to be stuck behind traffic. I mean, this is a environmental justice issue. This is a equity issue. This is public health issue. This is environmental. I mean, it's people that are, and this is actually, I think there's a misguided belief that this is going to slow traffic down. If anything, it's going to increase traffic because studies have shown that when you separate buses and bikes, it actually will increase traffic flow because they're not competing with buses that are constantly stopping, that are bikes that are in the same shared lane. I mean, we've had so many pedestrian fatalities, so many pedestrian accidents. I mean, I just think this is a no-brainer. I mean, all the surrounding cities are doing this, and I don't want Malden to be left behind. And I'll wrap it up with that. Thank you.
Thank you. John Weaver. Let's let John Weaver be allowed to talk. John Weaver, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me?
I do hear you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. My name is John Weaver. I am outside counsel for Verizon Wireless. My office is at 300 Trade Center, Woburn, Massachusetts. I'd like to respond to Ms. Doucette's comments that she made a minute or so ago, particularly with regard to the New Hampshire report that she reported on. Under New Hampshire law, a local authority may not mandate, require, or regulate the installation, location, or use of antennas on utility poles. That's done at a state level, and they're quite permissive, particularly given, particularly in comparison to Massachusetts standards. Same is true in Connecticut and Rhode Island. So the Massachusetts neighbors take a much more lenient view of small cell antennas than she seemed to suggest. Additionally, the FCC has been quite consistent for 25 years now with regard to the impact of antennas and the impact that they have on public health. And I certainly appreciate her position and the concerns that she raised, but both the federal government, state governments, and this local government have been pretty decisive in terms of how they wish that technology to be regulated. And the delay that she advocated for is not consistent with any of that. So I would urge the members of the city council to proceed as the ordinance in the city ordinance addressing small cells states, and to continue with their standard practices going forward. And thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate your time.
You're certainly welcome. Stephanie Waller.
Hi, this is Sam Sprankle. I'm on Stephanie Wall's computer. I live at 49 Cleveland Street.
State your name again, please.
Sam Sprankle,
Your address.
49 Cleveland Street.
Thank you.
No problem. I just want to say I'm in huge favor of support for having the bus lanes put in. I think that, you know, as a resident of Malden, and as I grow older, I would like to have, you know, access to these public transit systems, and, you know, have frankly them be improved so that, you know, as I age older, I don't have to worry about, you know, how I'm going to get from place to place once, like, I don't have a license anymore. It really allows me to stay in Malden and kind of age here without having to worry about the future. And I think that having these improvements brought to the city is going to be a huge boon in terms of the residents who live here, and even people who take the bus maybe to go to work from here. Another thing that I see all the time when, you know, pre-COVID is like people getting turned away at the bus stop at in the center of town. And that's really, like, anything we can get to get that down is, I think, a win for me. Plus if I understand the bus lanes correctly, like, they're in use mainly during peak hours, right? And then the rest of the time they're open for regular traffic. So I feel like it helps improve, like, flow of traffic, it helps move people, and it's going to make our city look better. I'm all for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's it. That's it for public comment. I don't see any other hands. Let's go on to the next order of business.
Next, for the approval of minutes, we have paper 135-21, minutes of March 9th, paper 136-21, minutes of March 16th, and paper 137-21, minutes of March 23rd.
On Councilor DiMaria's motion, do we accept the minutes as read? Or as delineated for the 9th, 16th, and 23rd? Seconded by Councilor Murphy. Clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Condon, yes.
Crowe,
Yes.
DiMaria,
Yes,
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Murphy, yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Tsige,
Tsige, yes.
Betafora,
Better yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. So those minutes are accepted. Next order of business.
We have three new appointments. Do you want them read all at once, or do you want them individually?
Please read them all at once.
Paper 138-21, appointment, mayoral appointment. Shukua Yuzawuzi, 122 Belmont Street, Malden, to the Disability Commission, said term to commence upon confirmation by the City Council and to expire March 15th, 2024. Paper 139-21, mayoral appointment, Lauren Schipper, 16 Main Street, Malden, to the Disability Commission, said term to commence upon confirmation by the City Council and to expire March 15th, 2024. And paper 140-21, mayoral appointment, Santi Chilukuri, 30 Franklin Street, Unit 123, to the Disability Commission, said term to commence upon confirmation by the City Council and to expire March 15th, 2023.
Is
Councilor
it
Crowe for the papers.
Isn't it 149-21? Is that a?
no.
Yes, there is one more.
Geez, I don't have that on mine.
That's the old one.
Oh, sorry.
Get an updated version, yes.
Paper number 149-21, appointment of Amanda Bells, 4 Stone Lane, to the Disability Commission, term to commence upon confirmation by the City Council to to expire March 15th, 2022. Councilor Crowe.
Since these are all new appointments, I make a motion that we refer these to the Personnel and Appointments.
Second.
Councilor Tsige seconds. Councilor Crow's motion that we refer these to the Appointments Committee. The clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
DeMaria,
Yes.
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Murphy, yes.
O'Malley,
O'Malley, yes.
Sika,
Tsige, yes.
Betafora,
Better yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Those appointments will be referred to the Appointments Committee. Next order of business.
Paper 141-21, petition National Grid 1101 Turnpike Street, North Andover, Mass. Plan number 298-21242, Eastern Ave. National Grid to install beginning at a point approximately 90 feet northeast of the center line of the intersection of Eastern Ave and Maplewood Street, and continuing approximately 8 feet in a northwest direction. Install 2-4 primary duct approximately 8 feet northeast from existing pole number 1952 towards 888 Eastern Ave for the purpose of servicing the customer with electrical service.
And the sponsor of that is Councilor Condon. So is this for public hearing?
For a public hearing, correct. Yep.
Okay, let us open the public hearing. Do we have the petitioner here with us this evening? Who is the petitioner?
National Grid.
I don't see them on.
I don't.
Socrates has his hand up.
Socrates, we see. We'll allow Socrates to bring us wisdom. Socrates, bring us the wisdom.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So,
Please state your name and address for the record.
sure. My name is Socrates Perez, address 170 Medford Street in Malden. The reason of this petition is to provide the customer with service. We are petitioning for 2 4-inch conduit from an existing pole, pole 1952, and it will be approximately 8 feet from that existing pole towards 888 Eastern Ave. So basically, we're just petitioning that section of the sidewalk.
Socrates, have you talked with the ward councilor about this?
Yes, the engineer for this project already spoke to the council, yes.
Do we have any confirmation of that, anyone?
I know that they reached out to Council Kamel and there was dialogue.
Okay, and we haven't heard anything negative back from?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to share with us about that, Socrates?
No, that will be it. Pretty straightforward from our end.
Okay, okay. So we have, this petition is open. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition that's before us? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Any of the attendees, if you raise your hand, I'll be able to see you. I see no hands raised other than Socrates.
Oh, see, Neal. Neal, I just had a question. Councilor Winslow.
Councilor Winslow wishes to speak. Hold on just one second, Councilor Winslow. Councilor Winslow, go right ahead.
So Socrates, this trench will be from basically 90 feet from like Maplewood Street towards Broadway?
No, it will be just from the existing pole towards the property line.
So that'll be trenched through the sidewalk?
Yeah, it will be just from that existing pole to 888. So it's basically, we're just petitioning for 8 feet. So from the existing pole to the property line.
So there'll be impact on the sidewalk, but it'll just be basically due north.
Yes.
So it'll be some small sidewalk panel that you guys will
Yes.
replace. Okay, all right, thank you. Great. I just want to understand. All right, thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? Seeing none, hearing none, I'll declare that portion of the meeting to be closed. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the petition? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Seeing none and hearing none, I declare that portion of the hearing to be closed. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the petition. Councilor Winslow.
So
I'll second
Councilor Winslow moves that we approve this, that we grant this petition. Seconded by
Yeah.
whom? Who was that seconded?
Spatafor.
Councilor Spatafora seconds that petition.
With the condition,
Right, standard
right.
condition.
we need
And
this,
with the conditions, please. Mr. Lucy, would you read those conditions?
I do not have it in front of me.
okay, well, I think I can probably ad lib them.
Yes, please do that.
I have my hand raised because I wanted to make sure they were added.
Okay,
That the sidewalk or any street work be agreed to by the DPW commissioner and repaired in a manner that he sees fit. I'm sure I'm ad-libbing it a little bit, but just want to make sure that that's on there.
so all sidewalk and roadway repairs are corrected and approved by the DPW director?
Yes,
That's your motion that goes along with this approval? I
Correct.
see Councilor O'Malley's hand is raised too. Councilor O'Malley, go right ahead.
And that dig safe be called.
thank you. Thank you, Councilor O'Malley.
Okay. Any other comment? So we have a motion that's been made and seconded with those conditions. The clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Yes.
Pro,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes,
Lenahan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Murphy, yes.
O'Malley,
O'Malley, yes.
Sika,
Tsige, yes.
Spatafora,
Spatafor, yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. So that has been approved by the city council. Next order of business.
Paper 142-21 petition, Cellco Partnership, DBA Verizon, 118 Flanders Road, Westboro, Mass. Cellco Partnership, DBA Verizon, installation of necessary telecommunication equipment and corresponding aerial fiber optic cable on National Grid-owned utility poles. Verizon also to install antenna and apparatus equipment and aerial fiber route. To collocate small wireless facilities, also referred to as small cells, on existing wooden utility poles located within the public right-of-way at the following locations: 448 Ferry Street, 72 Upham Street, 445 Bryant Street, 22 Sharon Street, 41 Maplewood Street, 175 Broadway, 632 Broadway, 135 Elwell Street, 562 Broadway, 69 Olive Ave, 4 Northern Road, 241 Lebanon Street, 95 Jacob Street, 740 Salem Street, 26 Division Street, 30 Rutland Street, 98 Pierce Street, 145 Cherry Street, 50 Hill Street, and 311 Forest Street.
Another public hearing.
No, no, this is coming out of committee.
This is a committee
Oh,
report.
no, this is going to,
No,
committee.
these are
Going to committee, yeah.
motion to refer to public property.
So on the motion by Councilor Lenahan to refer these petitions to Public Property Committee, seconded by Councilor O'Malley, the clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
DeMaria,
yes,
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Murphy, yes.
Malley.
Yeah.
Sika,
Tsige, yes.
Spatafora,
Spatafor, yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Those papers have been referred to the Public Property Committee. Next order of business?
Paper 144-21, resolve the Malden City Council supporting actions to maintain social distance on MBTA buses in response to COVID-19 state of emergency. Whereas beginning in March 2020, the federal and state government and the Malden Board of Health in declared states of emergency to respond to COVID-19. And whereas federal, state, and municipal declarations and subsequent orders have restricted the capacity of public transportation vehicles in order to allow for sufficient social distancing for passengers and drivers. Whereas the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority has modified bus schedules in Malden in an effort to provide more frequent service to allow for sufficient and social distancing. Whereas the Massachusetts Department of Transportation has created the Winter Shared Streets Grants Program with the intent of funding quickly implemented projects that can support public health, safe mobility, and renewed commerce. Whereas the MBTA has submitted applications to the Winter Shared Streets Grant Program and the Community Connection Program that will fund traffic signal prioritization improvements along Center Street, Salem and Main Streets, and bus lanes on Center and Main Streets that will help reduce travel times for MBTA buses along these corridors, thus providing further frequency of service for allowing for continued social distancing on buses. Whereas the traffic signal prioritization improvements can be utilized by the Malden Fire and Police Departments and local ambulance services to provide signal priority during emergency responses. Whereas the MBTA's Winter Shared Street proposal is consistent with Malden complete street policy and contains improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists, such as improved crosswalks and a dedicated bicycle lane connecting the northern strand to the Malden MBTA station. Resolved that the Malden City Council hereby supports the improvements contained in the MBTA's Winter Shared Streets and Community Connection Grant applications that presented to the council in April 2000.
Thank you. For the paper, for the resolve, Councilor O'Malley and Councilor Winslow. We'll start with Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Chair. If possible, we are joined by the MBTA. If you could promote Eric Berkman so he's able to speak in case you have any specific questions for the MBTA. If possible, I'd like to give as quick of a presentation as possible. Some of y'all have seen it previously, but I think it would be beneficial for members as well as the public.
That's fine. We can have the representative.
Thank you. So we're talking about transit signal prioritization and the Center Street or Route 60 bus and bike accommodations. We'll go over do an overview. We'll go over prior public engagement, the complete streets policy of our community, equity and transportation, infrastructure funding options, an overview of the specific grants that we're talking about tonight, what transit signal prioritization is on Salem Street, Main Street, and Center Streets. We'll go over the Center Street proposal, both the traffic analysis as well as the segments. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So as you have heard potentially previously, transit signal prioritization would include and help expedite travel for buses, public transit, as well as public safety vehicles like police, fire, ambulances will be able to use it. And we could even do shuttle buses or school buses in addition to that. It works through different types of technology, whether it's an optical detector or an emitter, or it can also be done through GPS. When it comes to the Center Street bus and bike accommodations, it is similar to what you see on Florence Street, which is kind of like a test study that we did with the MBTA. Also funded through the similar grant and cost us no money. How did we decide to do this? Well, this particular segment of road was highlighted in 2017 through the Complete Streets Task Force community engagement process, as well as various crash cluster data. This is a very dangerous stretch. At one of our public meetings, we actually had someone testify who got hit by a car on Center Street. And I personally know 2 others who got hit by buses on Center Street crossing. You'll see here on the right, it's over 8 different clusters, whether it's pedestrian, clash clusters in that brown, or in car crash clusters in red. You know, the city of Malden, through the leadership of Mayor Gary Christensen and Ward 1 Councilor Peg Crow and various other community advocates, were able to actually successfully implement a complete streets policy. I'm just going to really highlight the objective of the complete streets policy. The city of Malden recognizes that users of various modes of transportation, including but not limited to pedestrians, cyclists, transit and school bus riders, motorists, delivery and service personnel, freight haulers, and emergency responders, are legitimate users of roadways and deserve safe accessibility. All users include users of all ages, abilities, and income levels. The city recognizes that all roadway projects, including new construction, maintenance, and reconstruction, represent potential opportunities to apply complete streets design principles. This was signed in October of 2016. Again, by the leadership of Ward 1 Councilor Peg Crow, the City Council unanimously passed a resolution supporting this complete streets policy. As you'll see here, there were a lot of yeas here. And one of the benefits of doing this is we have been eligible for complete streets funding. And the proposal that we're presenting tonight complies with our complete streets policy and helps get us to what we hope to be future investment by different DOTs, both the state DOT as potentially also the federal DOT. Here you'll see there's a change in the discussion around transit infrastructure, focusing it heavily on equity. There are a lot of examples of overbuilt roads and highways being run through ethnic neighborhoods and diverse neighborhoods and really destroying communities. There's going to be a goal under the current administration to undo some of that harm. Addressing the inequities built into the national transportation system would require dismantling and retooling decades worth of physical infrastructure and addressing a more subtle but equally powerful culture that comes from the less visible parts of DOT's work, like setting standards for how roads are designed. Quote, this is part of what President Biden's ambitious, quote, Build Back Better plan calls for, including an express desire to redo streets and main arteries in communities, repair and lay down new sidewalks, and redo streetscapes, lighting, and among other things. When we talk about equity, we talk about how there's a really concerning trend of the fact that there's been a 45% increase in people struck and killed while walking in the last 4 years. We've seen an increase even on top of this with the high speeds that people have been driving during COVID-19. But the challenge is that this burden is not being shared equally. Older adults, people of color, and people walking in low-income communities are disproportionately represented in fatal car crashes involving people walking, even after controlling for differences in population size and walking rates. Here you'll see how the burden is amongst different races of our community, or the communities generally. As we said earlier, older adults are disproportionately killed by these accidents. And people walking in lower income communities are struck and killed at much higher rates than in our wealthier neighborhoods, as you can see here. A brief example would be, you think about the tree-lined boulevards of certain neighborhoods of Malden and other communities, and then you have some neighborhoods in Malden that have no sidewalks whatsoever. Broadway in some parts has no sidewalks. Equity and transportation infrastructure. We unfortunately did have a fatality, not long ago, and it was an elderly person in line with the data that has shown. But failing to act is consenting to more preventable deaths. So how do we try to fix our infrastructure without breaking the bank? There's some different pots of money that we can be using. We all know about Chapter 90 funds. I won't explain to the council how that works. We all know how it works. Local property taxes, we know how that works. And the last bucket is really what we're proposing here tonight, to use federal and state grants through the Community Connections Grant and the Shared Streets and Spaces Grant in order to really get this done without impacting the City of Malden's budget whatsoever. The Shared Streets and Spaces Program in fall of 2020 allocated funds to municipalities ranging from $5,000 in grants to $300,000 in grants. There was a total of $10.2 million allocated to 103 communities. Now, we in Malden received actually over $259,000. If you divide $10.2 million by 103, it's just under $100,000. You'll see we're coming in batting over our average when it comes to this. And that's because of the hard work of the city of Malden, partnering with the administration of Mayor Gary Christensen, as well as Councilor Winslow and others. We were able to really get a lot of money to get some stuff done. And it's only increased since then. Now we're up in the $500,000 range for this particular grant. And when you put that into consideration and add that to the Community Connections grant, we're over $1 million in grants potential. The Florence Street, again, is just an example of what we were able to do with this. What we're talking about tonight is $225,000 for transit signal prioritization on Salem Street. And we'll get into what that exactly means. And we're talking about $350,000 for transit signal prioritization on Main and Center Streets. Center Street is also Route 60. And in addition to that, we are talking about a Center Street bus accommodation in the value of $491,000 from Franklin to the MBTA station. The total investment is over $1 million here. We have applied and we have gotten word that, as soon as we can approve this, we will have the money and we will be able to move forward if we so choose. Transit signal prioritization. What this would entail is getting the new brains and maybe even whole new transit signal control boxes, as well as new technology on the lights in order to detect approaching vehicles. Again, we said public safety vehicles like police and fire and ambulance, as well as MBTA buses, and it can also be school buses. There would be an ability for police and fire to control the traffic signals if they need to respond to an emergency. And most importantly, the city of Malden, through the engineering department, would maintain ultimate control over the system. So if for some reason it needs to be shut off or changed or modified, we have that ability. In scope, again, Main, Salem, and Center Streets. The Center Street proposal, which I think is what we're probably most looking to dive into tonight or at a future meeting if we choose to table. The Center Street project here, the goals are to increase pedestrian safety with new crosswalks and pavement markings, improve travel times for all modes of transit, add left and right turning lanes in order to get people out of the way of the cars that are moving straight, read time the signals and link up with the transit signal prioritization, and improve the artificial bottleneck effect that we've created by going from one lane in each direction, east of Franklin Street, ballooning to 2 lanes in each direction, right in our downtown where we have the most pedestrian activity, back down to 1 lane in each direction just after the MBTA station and the fire station over by BB. The other benefit would be to finally provide a connection between the Northern Strand Trail and the MBTA. I'm going to add one additional goal. One of the additional goals here is that by doing this type of project here and showing the state that we do good things with the money that they give us, we very well could be on our way to getting tens of millions, up to $30 million or more to redo Center Street and reconstruct it in a complete streets manner. This is something that is happening in communities like Lynn and other communities around us. We've gotten just over $2 million for Exchange Street. We are starting to really get a good reputation at the state level for doing good things with the grant money that they give us. So why should we implement this project? One, bus ridership in our community. There are over 7,600 daily riders on Center Street. And these come from 10 different bus routes that go down Center Street. It's an amazing amount of buses. There is a large low-income and minority population that is served by public transportation, and this continues to be the case, particularly with the fact that there are many industries that you cannot work from home from, and there is still a need, is a critical safety net in our community, which is public transit. We also should implement this because the data and the facts show that this road is overbuilt and can't handle the current traffic as well as the historic highs of traffic years ago that we've seen. The westbound morning rush hour is 898 vehicles per hour. The eastbound evening rush hour is 908. An important figure here to know is that the traffic volumes actually decreased at Jackson Street and Center / Route 60 between 2015 and 2018. That was before the pandemic. And we've seen an even acceleration of that trend with the pandemic and more people working from home. So while public transit is still necessary for a large segment of our community, the fact that more people are working from home has changed traffic patterns, making something like this even more successful. In a single lane capacity is 1,200 vehicles per hour. As you can see, the 908 and the 898 are well within that range. It also addresses a critical bus service delay that the MBTA has in its system. It's actually the only bus service delay that the MBTA has not been able to put money into and invest in. We are the only community that has not worked with the MBTA to get something like this implemented. Again, as I said earlier, 10 bus routes served, the 99, the 101, the 104, the 105, the 106, the 108, the 131, the 137, the 411, and the 430. Again, that equals 7,600 weekday riders. This project also entirely occurs in an environmental justice community, and in environmental justice census tract even. And it is purple here on this list, which means that it qualifies for all three of the designations: minority status, income level, as well as English isolation. Here's some demographic information about the bus ridership in Malden. 36 are minority non-white, 41% are low income, 32% are car-free households. Briefly going to go through an updated, we did provide all of the designs to the counselors. It was delivered to their homes from the MBTA. We do have an updated plan that I'm going to show based on reduced amount of paint. It still looks like a lot of paint, but it is reduced paint, and some other feedback that we've heard from counselors as well as the traffic commission and the public during this process. The segments that we're going to go through: Malden Center, MBTA station to Main Street, Center to Pleasant, Main Street to Holden / the Northern Strand Trail, all along Center, and Holden Street to Franklin Street, again on Center Street. So Malden Center, MBTA station, down Center to Main Street. Here you'll see, just to orient yourself, north is up on your screen. To the left would be eastbound. To the right, to the left would be westbound. To the right would be eastbound. On the westbound approach, you see there's an expanded left turn lane. It's pretty substantial. There's also a shared right turn lane and a dedicated through lane here. It's these expanded turning lanes that allow cars to get out of the way of the vehicles that are going straight. This is what allows and enables a one lane to deal with all of the traffic that's there, and will actually improve traffic outcomes and reduce traffic clusters, et cetera, for all modes of transit. On the eastbound approach, there's a dedicated left turn lane at Jackson Street, and there's a shared right turn lane going into Canal Street, as well as the Stop and Shop parking lot, which you'll see here. Again, here you'll see the left turn lane onto Jackson Street right here, and you'll see the through lane. Again, shared right turn lane into Stop and Shop. Wherever there's a cross-hatching, wherever you see the lines broken, that is when cars are allowed to move over the dedicated lanes, whether it's the bike lane or the bus lane. I'm not going to go through all of it in terms of like reading every one of the features, but I will go through. If there are any particular questions, raise my hand or raise your hand. You'll see here, this is at Jackson and Stop and Shop. This is here at Middlesex. I will go into a little bit more detail here at Middlesex. there is on the eastbound approach a dedicated left turn lane going into the CDB garage right here. There is also a dedicated left turn lane onto Main Street. Obviously, there's a dedicated straight through lane, and there's also a dedicated right turn lane onto Middlesex, or a shared right turn lane onto Middlesex, and a dedicated right turn lane onto Main Street.
So Councilor O'Malley, do you plan to send this to committee? Is that what your plan is for this evening?
I wanted to hear what, well, not to a committee, maybe a committee of the whole if possible. We are some time sensitive nature of this. So I was hoping to get the temperature of councilors tonight.
Well, there are a
in
couple
order
of
to better prepare.
Okay, so there are a couple of hands that are raised. So let's, if you've covered a lot of it, let's see if we can let some of the folks who have raised their hands jump in here. Who wants to speak first? Councilor Murphy?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to speak first.
Your name is up top, so you
I know. I think I raised my hand immediately. Councilor O'Malley, thank you for that presentation. Obviously, you covered a lot in a very short period of time. A couple of things that I would like to say. The first thing I would like to say is I am going to make a motion to table this, but I would like to add a few comments. And I obviously, once a motion to table is made, if it's seconded, I know that it does stop discussion. I don't want to do that this evening, although I would like to hear a second on that and then let discussion continue. But we were all at a traffic commission meeting a couple of weeks ago, where I think a number of us who had not really been apprised of a lot of this attended because we were caught a little bit off guard. And in that meeting, the traffic commission voted to actually bring this to the city council. And I understand there was a meeting last week or the week before with a couple of councilors, but not all of us with the T to discuss this further. And I was a little upset about that when I heard about it, that the rest of us weren't included in that discussion. And now this has come to the table. I thought this was going to be a deliberated effort. We would all have received the information, not just Friday night, which I did get. I will grant that I did get, finally pictures, papers that showed what this was going to look like from Franklin Street, which is in Ward 5, through to the MBTA station. But I don't have a PDF of that. I have not been able to share that with my constituents at all. And I, out of the blue, which was read tonight, received an email from a constituent in Ward 5 that I hadn't solicited, saying that they were against it. And I did say to her, could you send that to the city clerk? Because I'm kind of at a little bit of a loss myself as a sitting councilor. And this is not something that just ward centric. It doesn't just impact, Ward 4 or Ward 1 or the little bit of Ward 5 or Ward 7 that it's in. This affects transportation from one end of the city to the other. And I don't think this is something that can be rushed forward. I think this is something that needs to be discussed in detail. And I also think this is something that needs a public hearing so we can hear from our constituents. And, I like the fact that we're throwing out funds, and that's what developers do to us when they want to bring in an apartment building in, that, we're going to lose out on X number of dollars of real estate taxes. But there's the other side of this impact that I think we need to discuss. And I think the other thing we really need to discuss is how many of you here tonight know exactly how much we pay the T? The city of Malden, our tax dollars go to the T for them to be able to be in the city of Malden. And just in case you don't know it, I'm going to tell you what it is. It's $4.1,001,245. So when they come to us trying to say that they need something to help them be better positioned, provide more ridership, et cetera. And they're, we're holding out, X number of dollars. We need to be thinking about what we're paying them. And we're paying them a lot of money to have the Malden Tea Station and the Oak Grove Tea Station in our city. So I think there's a much larger discussion that needs to be held here. And personally, I don't want to be held to a time frame from them. So I want to have a discussion about this. And I think it's important that our residents be able to be a part of this discussion as to what they want their city to look like. Do they want it to look like Cambridge or Somerville, or do they want it to look like Melrose and Malden? So that's my 2 cents, but my motion to table this for further discussion has been made.
Counselor, would you mind holding your tabling motion? There are just a few other hands that are up. Would you allow to speak?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I say that because tabling motions under the rules should stop all discussion, but I think you want to allow other councilors to speak.
I absolutely do.
Okay. Councilor Winslow, you're next.
Can I share my screen for a second?
Go right ahead, Councilor Winslow.
I know so many of us go through Malden in our cars, and I want you to imagine what it is like for our many residents, those 7,600 people, including myself often, who are on our buses. So imagine, this is a picture I just happened to take February 10th, 2020, as COVID was just starting to strike. So this is congestion that our residents have to deal with on the MBTA. This is only 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This goes on all the way till 7 o'clock. So I just want to say that our residents who take transit are important. And this is why we adopted Complete Streets policies. Not everybody in our community can get in a car. We have people that are too young or too old, or like Dee Campbell, who spoke tonight, who has a disability. So that's why we really need to do this. And I think the other thing I have to say is that I know, often councilors have talked about the great survey that was done with thousands of input from our residents several years ago about housing. And when people were asked what was a great quality about Malden, they said access to transit was a critical thing. So Malden is a transit dependent community. Many people in our community rely on this. And we talk about, that actually, we talk about trying to make Malden look like Melrose. Route 60 is an alien thing compared to Melrose. Melrose does not have a 4-lane highway through its downtown. And so neither should Malden. So I think that's the thing we're thinking of. So, but I just want you to imagine you being on this bus. And now with COVID, how are we going to, no wonder why people aren't riding on our buses. Who would want to get on a crowded bus with 60 people? So this is the whole effort here. And, we didn't plan on COVID happening. These grants, as we, well know, this is a one-time opportunity. We can talk, we can dither, the money's going to be gone if that happens. And so I just want to say that these are our residents. This isn't the MBTA coming. These are our residents who need this, and I'm speaking up for them. And that's why this has been important for me as a transportation advocate. And I want to speak for these residents. And I think this is important. So I do think, certainly always anticipated we could do this more as a council as a whole. I want people to fully understand it, but I am supportive. Our residents who take these crowded MBTA buses deserve to be listened to and accommodated just as much as people who sit in a car and have the luxury of being separated from people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Crowe?
Thank you, Mr. President. So when I first sort of heard about this, I reached out to a couple of other communities that do have transportation engineers. And just because they didn't have a skin in the game, they weren't like the city, they weren't the MBTA. And so their on Mystic Ave in Medford and Somerville, they are going to be doing a bus lane, the same thing. But it really was, even if when you talk to some people over at MassDOT, there was a very diametrically opposing views. The bus and bike lane people at MassDOT said this would help all the things that we are hearing tonight. But then really on the operation side, even in MassDOT, they don't all agree, actually. So what, through a lot of negotiations, Medford and Somerville with MassDOT is they're going to be doing a pilot one. They're not doing the whole red. They make it smaller blocks, so there's not as much painting, and they are going with the 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. So, which I mean, I don't understand why we can't be taking a more measured approach instead of jumping all the way in. Just, kind of like when we're talking about some of the other projects that we want to do, we are behind. We are behind in doing some of these things, but I don't know why we have to leap forward, leapfrog right to the beginning of this. So, and even like the timing of the lights, two traffic engineers said, that'll help, but it's not going to be the be all end all that people really think it is. So I do think this is, as we even see tonight, people that, have sent letters, they have a lot of strong opinions, either side. And I do understand that is a time constraint because when the grant is due, but you've all been able to, Council Winslow and Council O'Malley, been able to sit with this since November. And so people are just hearing about this. And, I do think that we really need to have more conversations, really get our residents involved to understand, change is difficult, but to understand what's happening. So I feel like, we're sort of rushing into doing this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that maybe that's not the right measured approach that we should be taking.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Condon?
Thank you, Counselor. I had the opportunity to weigh in on that Traffic Commission meeting. And I thought the traffic commissioners had mentioned that they'd like to see this brought to the public for a public hearing as well as the city council. So I'm a little disappointed in that respect that there was no, in the last couple of weeks, there's been nothing done to put a public hearing together. Because I think there's a lot of people out there that don't want to see this. They mentioned 7,600 people, but they're starting off very slow here. There's certainly not a lot of people that come down Florence Street in crowded buses, that's for sure. And I don't think there's that many crowded buses. How many actual buses go down Center Street to get to Franklin Street? I haven't seen many crowded buses. The buses may have been crowded before COVID, but I think that it's going to change. The world has changed. People are working from home and they're not traveling on the buses as much. And if they are, it's because the Orange Line is doing so much work on their tracks. They're running a lot of buses. So I don't know how many buses go down Center Street, but I'm always down that street. And certainly the buses are much more prevalent on Salem Street and Main Street. And that's who's carrying most of the passengers. But if you look, it's my understanding that the MBTA will initially invest $1 million that will be their outlay on the project. We haven't seen what's going to happen once you go down Salem Street. All right, like I was in Broadway, Everett today, where they've lost so much parking down there. They do it from, I think it's from 6 to 9 on one side and 4 to 7 the other side. And I was in a business And he said, what do I tell my customers where they can park? There's no parking down there from 4 to 7, and it's killing some of those small business owners. Well, that's what's going to happen on Salem Street, and that's what's going to happen on Main Street, because where do these cars go park? You're taking that parking away from them. You may not be taken away from Florence Street and Center Street, but I think that's why they started there. But you're gonna see a big problem when the parking's taken away. Hopefully it's short periods of time and not all day long, but it will happen. In Salem Street, there's a lot of small businesses there, and they're gonna have a big problem because people are not gonna know where to park. You know, and I know some people have to take buses, but also people have to get back and forth to work.
Point of information.
So
you've had a chance. You will get to you, Councilor O'Malley. Let's let
I
him
just have a
finish
point
his-
of, I just have a point of information.
You-
We're not proposing it.
Not a point of.
There's a misunderstanding that we're not proposing to take away parking on Salem Street. That's a misunderstanding of the proposal.
then you're not proposing to have bus lanes.
Not on Salem Street, no. We're talking about Center Street.
I understand you're talking about Center Street, but there's 2 lanes on Salem Street, one going east and one going west. Both sides have parking of vehicles. It was mentioned that the plan was to go to Center Street and Main Street. So you are talking about Center Street because that's the next part of the plan.
We're not.
I mean, let's be
Counselor.
honest. It said it right
We're
in
not.
your presentation.
I don't want to go back and forth. I'll clarify when I have my turn.
Okay. So the way the plan was brought up, the next part of this plan will go Main Street and Salem Street. And that will be a problem for parking. It was mentioned that we're assessed over $4.1 million. Why can't the T consider reducing that a little bit? Because we're assuming the maintenance after their initial outlay. And I don't believe these lanes are gonna last for 10 years, not with the salt and the plows and the snow that is gonna tear them up. You know, I would suggest you can look at Florence Street and see the white part already coming up, and it's only been there less than a year. So I think that's been exaggerated. So if we have to assume the maintenance costs, it has to be a few $100,000 in the vicinity of $2,000 to $300,000 to maintain these bus lanes. And if we have to do that every 4 or 5 years, and the MBTA doesn't give you anything on it, well, that's going to take a hit to us. So I think you have to prepare for that. And I only bring this up because I want people to think about that. And you know what? I don't know if you ever drove through Somerville and Cambridge, but it is a nightmare. I'm sorry. The bicycles are coming from every different direction, and so are the cars. So it's not a fun time to drive your vehicle through Somerville and Cambridge. So I get more complaints, you know, that when people see this, but I don't think it's going to have a huge effect on Center Street or Florence. The effect comes in when they start putting it on Main Street and Salem Street. Then we have a mess. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lenahan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councilor O'Malley. You know, I've spoken on this issue a lot of times at all the meetings that have happened. I don't want to be redundant to those remarks I've already given or what others have said. But honestly, a huge reason why I ran for the council in the first place was because I felt like there was very few voices representing the point of view of people who had to commute by the T every single day, who had to get their children to Malden Public Schools every single day without district transportation. You know, the fact of the matter is those voices are the majority of folks who live in our community. You know, before the pandemic, I think a third of all ridership on the T data show was on buses, and that even throughout the past year, it's really been the bus that has been the core of the system and supporting ridership across the MBTA system. You know, today or one of the days earlier this week, the state did announce that they plan to restore prior levels of service. And when I look at my ward, you know, Malden and specifically the west side of the city send some of the highest numbers of commuters through the MBTA system of any neighborhood in the entire region every single day. And the more unreliable the buses are in our city, it not only inconveniences the existing motorists that are on the road, it actually adds traffic because it pushes people that intended to ride the bus into Uber and Lyft. Numerous studies that the state has done has shown that. So honestly, not doing this will effectively worsen the congestion, and that's for everyone, regardless of how they're getting around. I think you often hear the most on issues like this from cyclists and transit riders who will be affected by it, and rightly so. And I'm proud to say that I'm both of those things. But I do think that what often gets left out is how much this will actually help people in cars. The communities that have completed these projects, whether they are pilots, rush hour only, 24/7, however it's tailored to that community, they've shown to improve the commerce along the corridor, the foot traffic, people going in and spending money at the local businesses. You know, I really feel like there's almost nothing that you could do that would be as effective at helping our small business community than making it easier for all users to get around a stretch like this. And if you look at places like Everett or Arlington, you know, they've actually brought in their arts community and either worked with the schools, art teachers and students, or professional working artists to bring in a public art component to some of the bus projects that they've done. So they've added, you know, paying contracts for artists and beautified the neighborhood too. So, you know, I don't want to be redundant to what others have said, but I couldn't agree more with Councilor O'Malley on this being an equity issue. It opens us up to future funding. You know, the state itself is going to be doing not just complete streets, but, you know, we're not adding lanes to roads. We're not adding parking. We're not, the future of the state, the way it's going to be investing in infrastructure is doing projects like this. So we'd be served to do this now and get in at a point where it can be a foundation and see what works, see what doesn't, tailor it, and then be able to leverage that for future state monies down the line. And then really the last thing that I wanted to say that, you know, I'm remembering that probably 2 summers ago, a collection of youth from some of our local leadership programs that ACDC and GMAC run actually gave a presentation to a few city leaders. I think I was just a candidate at the time. I definitely wasn't on the council yet. It was prior to COVID. And our legislative delegation was there. And they actually had done a long project that year, like probably 6 months long, where they identified the areas of the city that they found it hardest to get around as students at the high school, as teens navigating the community. And this exact area was where they singled out as the place that they would most like to see improvements. So, you know, that's the voices of our teens that we're always talking about, wanting to elevate the voices of youth and listen to what they see as the future of the community. Is this project perfect? No. I wish we could reduce some of the pedestrian crossings. I wish some of the cycling lanes, you know, were more protected. But I think it would be a huge misstep to turn this down. I feel like Councilors O'Malley and Winslow gave us a solid heads up they'd be applying for this a couple months ago. It's gone to a extremely well-attended public community meeting where there was real-time participation and a recording that was shared. Many of us have heard from our constituents. It's been before the Traffic Commission at least once, maybe twice. And now it's back before us again tonight. And we have a paper copy to have reviewed, from which I certainly learned a lot. I would hate to see us turn this down. I'm obviously very strongly in favor of it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk on it one more time.
Thank you, Council. Council Spatafora?
Mr. President, I appreciate it. First, I want to go on the record. I don't really have an issue with, I think, the pilot. What I do have an issue with is, and I said this publicly before, We talk about transparency in the city and talk about translation of services. This was only presented to, I know it was mentioned, but there was no maps. There was nothing given. And I know Council O'Malley had in a meeting, but I think the request by the traffic committee was to actually have a public meeting. And when I say a public meeting, were any of the abutters on any of these roads or small businesses notified by mail and had a public meeting? Because at the end of the day, if it is really good for the business, and I don't have the answer, then we should bring them into the discussion. The idea that we're debating a topic that I've talked to some business owners that had no idea this was coming, I find that a travesty. I do. When we put a handicap spot on a street or a stop sign on a street, we need to get the residents on that street to sign a notice, or we mail in a letter to their house. The idea that we can't mail something to all the abutters on the street and all the businesses and say, this is the plan, I think that would bring out some good ideas. Like Councilor Crowe mentioned, and I talked to Councilor Crowe over the weekend about it. I asked the MBTA the last meeting, does it have to be only buses, public buses, and cyclists? Can it be private buses? They said it's up to you. I think that's a great idea. Can we do that? Does it have to be? One resident today said in the beginning of the meeting, oh, it's only during during rush hour. This plan is not only rush hour. This plan is the whole entire day. I think it would be great to try it out in rush hour. I don't want to see the MBTA let those assets that we're going to be getting for the timing and the right and the left turn lanes go to waste. But the idea, again, that we're not reaching out to all the constituents. We're having public meetings. It is now 9:30 at night on this call. 9:30 at night. There are 19 individuals on this call, and I can see by half of them are not Malden residents. Real quick, we should do a mailing and have a public meeting, get the input there. And then I would like to know, I know the resolve says we're going to vote on something that's going to happen in April. I don't know how we vote on something that's happening in April. That's not how I vote. But my question would be is, are we committed to talking about making any changes in terms of will we allow school buses or private buses to use that lane in addition to the MBTA buses and bicyclists? Are we open to having it from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning and 4 to 8 at night for the rush hours of pilot? I mean, any of those things been discussed? No, we're asking to vote on something again where I would like to talk. I would like to see the residents on that street and the business owners be notified. That's it. I mean, I got 2 emails from 2 people on Holyoke Street that basically said, "Don't vote for this because my street's going to be a cut through." And I don't know if they're right or wrong. But I just feel like if we're going to have a public meeting, we should do it the right way and not doing it at 9 o'clock at night. And all the abutters and all these streets should be notified like any other traffic measure we take. I know we had a traffic meeting, but we all know that not everybody tunes into these things. So that would be my recommendation in terms of having a public meeting with all those residents, as well as are we open to some of these other ideas that Council Crow's shared, as well as what other communities are doing right now. And I just want to say this. I've reached out to the mayor of Everett. When we talk about Everett, it's a little different. They added a lane. They took away parking and added a lane. We're not adding a lane. So it's not apples for apples. And listen, I hope it works because it would be better for everybody. But the idea is we're doing these meetings at 9 o'clock at night, and I haven't seen one business owner on these calls because they don't know. They do not know. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Tsige.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a few questions. So I was also on that traffic commission meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I heard loud and clear that they wanted us to get more public input. But my question is, Councilor O'Malley, why did they pick Franklin Street to start at Franklin Street? Do you happen to know that answer? Why Franklin? Why are we starting it back at Franklin? Because I researched the 106, the 108, the 411, the 430, and they all get onto Center Street at Main. So I also
would you like me to answer? Or
yes, please.
So I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at the plans. It sounds like you haven't looked at the plans. If you look at the plans, we're not proposing that the bus lane go to Franklin Street. The whole point of this is, I find it a little disingenuous that councilors proposed a 25 mile per hour speed limit. We don't put up any signs. and we don't actually improve our roads to make them any safer. People still speed, people are still getting hit.
Councilor
including
O'Malley, this isn't answering my question.
So I am answering your question. I'm going to get there. So the thing is, what I explained earlier is Route 60 goes from one lane in each direction. It balloons to 4 lanes and everyone speeds right in the downtown where everyone's walking. You have children, you have elderly. So the point is to, rather than have people have a speedway where people are racing, where my freshman year of high school, someone died because they were racing on that street. Rather than it be a raceway, we want to make it calmer so people can actually cross. That's why it's from Franklin Street. We would like it to be one lane in each direction on the entirety of Route 60, because that's what Route 60 is in every other community except in downtown Malden. Is that clear?
Yep, thank you.
You're
I'm
welcome.
not done yet, Council President. So I think based on 5 people writing in favor of this and 3 people writing in against it, I don't think that's enough for us to pass a resolve for something like this. When we say we have about 7,600 riders on the transit every day, I think like we send everything else to citizen engagement. I think this should actually be sent to citizen engagement, and I think we should have public meetings in every ward across this city to get some, rail data to see if in fact this is something that our residents want or they don't want. I don't think that this is something that should be rushed. Unlike Councilor Linehan, I was just informed of this weeks ago. I didn't have the luxury of finding out about this back in November. So once Councilor Murphy's motion is voted on, I'd like to make a motion to send this resolve to the Citizen Engagement Committee to have public meetings throughout the city in each ward.
There are 2 hands that are up of people that have spoken. So if I may, from the chair, just add that I'd like to see some more information about this as well. I've had the opportunity to hear one presentation which rather confused me, because I did see it on the computer on small screen to be able to try to figure out what all this meant. We did get the larger renderings in the mail the other day, and I had the chance today to take a ride with Councilor Winslow as we looked at what was going on. It was off hours, but looked at what was going on in Everett. We rode through Somerville and saw how those roads have been separated out for bus lanes and such. So it's happening around. So it's worth us looking into it and seeing whether it makes sense for us. I'd like to hear from some of our residents as well. I think Councilor Spatafor, you make a good point that we need to get the message out to these businesses, but we also need to hear from some of our own experts. I mean, it's one thing to hear from the MBTA, but how about a traffic engineer that's hired by the city of Malden to tell us if what the MBTA is telling us really makes sense? Let's not just rely upon what it is that the T is telling us that it's going to be more effective. So I'm all for sending it on for more review. I appreciated the opportunity that I had with one of my constituents, Barbara Kim and Steve Winslow, to watch the buses going down Center Street, and it did give me an opportunity to see the activity going on down there. And this thing has some potential, but we really have a lot of questions that still need to be answered. So that's the input that I would have. Now I'll go back to Councilor Murphy, who has a motion and her hand is up, and then I'll follow that with Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess, just listening to what everyone said tonight, I think a public hearing is really something that should be the next step. I think, we've many times in most of our discussions talked about basically bringing issues to the public in multiple languages. I haven't seen really any of that happen. So I do think we need to be cognizant of the fact that, we are not all English speaking, and we need to make sure that if we do have a public hearing, that we do address this in multiple languages so all of our constituents know what's happening. I personally would like it back. I did receive a hard copy, I believe Friday night, of what was proposed. I would like to a PDF version of that so that I can share it with my constituents. And I also think that many people, including myself, like, I don't think, we keep saying Center Street. Center Street's a very short section, and I don't think maybe a number of people realize that we're talking about Route 60, which is kind of a major thoroughfare through our city. So I'd like to see us, make sure that when we are talking about this, that we just don't say Center Street, we actually say Route 60, maybe Center Street / Route 60, just so that there's clarity about what we're talking about. And I believe, I don't know if it was Councilor Winslow or Councilor O'Malley said that there was a T representative on the discussion this evening. And I would just like to say to him personally, because I believe, I'm assuming it was the same person which was at the Traffic Commission. And I would just like to remind him that there are 11 city councilors and we all need to be involved, that he shouldn't be going to meetings with only some of us, that, we all need to be a part of this discussion. It's not just up to a few. So thank you. And my motion to table still stands. Looking for a second.
You have a second, I think, from Councilor Tsige, but I want to let Councilor O'Malley, who we've asked to they'll be the last word on this, and then we'll take them. Is yours, Councilor Murphy, a tabling motion or a motion to refer it to committee?
I would have it, if there's a committee to refer it to, that would be fine. But I just can't vote on this tonight without more information. So if we want to send it to Councilor Winslow, you are chair of.
So if I could, because I think I agree with Councilor Murphy's motion to refer it or table it to a committee of the whole, maybe for a public hearing, is what you were saying?
Public hearing.
Would that be? Because you want everyone to be involved, but we can't all be involved
actually
unless we have a public meeting with all of us.
Councilor O'Malley, I don't want to speak over you, but I don't really believe, I believe it needs a public hearing, but I think the council needs to debate. I think, as a group, we need to at least talk about what our issues are and what we see as the problem. Okay.
So I agree. So I agree with you. And the only way to do that is to have a public meeting of the city council. So that would be what we refer it to a committee of the whole for, and we can have a public hearing. So I would second your motion to table or refer it to a committee of the whole so that we all can do it exactly what you're saying and have a public hearing. The thing is, it would be great if we could put a time frame on that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, because delay is to vote no on this. Delay is to turn away $1 million. The MBTA did not create this time frame. This is a MassDOT grant that we've applied to, and we do have the MBTA on the call. I asked that they be promoted to a panelist. If you would like to ask the MBTA specific questions, you can do that now. But we are not allowed, because of the open meeting law, to invite all 11 counselors to a meeting with the MBTA, because that would be a violation of the open meeting law. So if you have a question for the MBTA, they are on the call right now. You could ask them questions. They've listened to the entirety of our conversation. If you would like to table it or refer it to a committee of the whole, to have a public hearing and to ask the MBTA questions, we can do that also.
I would like to refer it to a committee of the whole, not for a public hearing, but for the committee, the entire council, to be privy to a conversation about what's going on here. And I know that even in traffic, we talked about all of these grants are not contingent upon each other. They're all separate grants. So just because, I know from listening to, at the Traffic Commission, that the MBTA said that, yes, it would be looked more favorably on if all of this went through, but the grant for the signalization is a separate grant. And, these are some of the things that we just haven't had a chance to talk about or vet. And, I think we as a council need to have a discussion about what this means for the city, kind of get all our questions on the table, and then after that, have a public hearing where we can hear from the public.
So Councilor Murphy, would you restate your motion?
Pardon me?
I'd like you to restate your motion.
I would restate my
Restate your motion.
I would like to refer this to a committee of the whole meeting where all councilors can discuss this at length. I would also like a PDF of the file to be sent to me that I can share.
Let's take one at a time. So we got a motion on the floor from Councilor Murphy to refer this to a committee of the whole.
Second that.
And we have a second to that motion. I see a hand up, Councilor Spatafora. Councilor Spatafora, if you're speaking, would you unmute yourself?
I'm sorry. I just would hope that we can also have a mailing, a letter to all the abutters if we're going to have this meeting so they know about it, so we're not back in this predicament again. So anybody on that corridor that's going to be changed, right? And it could be good for them. They should just be. I would like to see them receive a letter so they know that there's a public meeting coming on.
Seconded.
Well, is it a public meeting?
Well, they can at least watch it, Council Murphy, and give input.
But then we need a public meeting. We need a public meeting where people who are traveling from to the west end of the city, and I hear Councilor Linehan about the ridership that's on the west side, but this isn't affecting the west side. This is affecting the east side, and I want to make sure that all of the east side knows what's happening.
So
they are the folks.
So let me jump in here. Councilor Murphy has made a motion that we have a committee of the whole meeting. You haven't made a motion that we have a public hearing. I hear Councilor Spatafora suggesting that be a meeting where we invite the public as well. I think there are two different issues that are going on here.
Well,
I'd like some resolution on what it is that we want to go forward with.
Okay, so let me restate this. Okay, so I have two motions. One is that we have a committee of the whole meeting that is dedicated to discussing this particular proposal that has been made. Okay, that's the first proposal, and included in that would be that all abutters on this particular area from Franklin Street down to the T would be notified that the council is discussing this. The second motion that I would make is that we have a public hearing prior to any council decision that would be, that everybody from the entire city would be able to voice their opinions as to whether or not they think that this particular proposal is appropriate for our city.
Okay, we hear those motions. We get a couple of hands up. Councilor O'Malley.
Council President Anderson, I appeal to you. Out of the time-sensitive nature of this, can we please have a committee of the whole meeting and a public hearing on the same night? It's what we do for the planning board. It's what we do for many different things. It would allow us to meet and hear people for and against, and then it would allow us to make a decision once and for all. It's a time-sensitive request. I have no problem with a public hearing. I have no problem with a public meeting, but let's just be genuine and try to do this in a time-sensitive manner. Every hoop that has been presented before me, I have jumped through. I will jump through 3, 4, 5, 10 more hoops. Can we please just try to be genuine and actually work towards getting this? And if it is the decision of the entire body that we don't want this, I will be okay with that. But let's just try to have a meeting and a hearing on the same night so this can be possible.
Councilor Linehan, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to suggest the same thing that Councilor O'Malley just stated for efficiency. Otherwise, I think we're de facto turning it down if we stretch it out longer than we can actually get the money. I also was just going to offer, instead of maybe a letter to abutters, what if we did the reverse, the citywide call that would reach anybody that has a stake in it? Because it's not just going to be the abutters, right? It's going to be people who commute through there or utilize the corridor to get to school or jobs. Just to catch a wider net, that might be a more cost-effective and faster way to do it and reach more people.
So the maker of the motion, do we accept those suggestions, maker of the motion?
No,
Is that for me?
no, it's for me.
Councilor Murphy is the maker of the motion.
No, let's take the motions one at a time. And then we can go back. If they fail, we'll go back to another one. I think this is too important to the city. It is the future of our city. And I am having a major problem being put under a time constraint for $1 million. I think that this rushing something like this, it is not a good thing as to how we want to move forward as a city. We vet everything. And, you know, having our feet held to the fire to change, you know, really the structure of what Malden is and how we want to move forward. I think it needs some time. So, you know, might be voted down tonight, but, you know, my motion is that, you know, we have a committee of the whole, so that all of us councilors, myself included, like, I didn't get a copy of this till Friday night. Okay, I don't have a PDF.
So Councilor Murphy, you realize that you could make the motion.
I did.
That we have a meeting of the whole to discuss that. And there can be another motion that can be made for following that at that same meeting that someone else can make, that we have a public hearing on this.
And I did. I actually made two motions. One was that we have a meeting of the whole, and then after that, we have a public hearing that will, you know, be in multiple languages, so that from the transparency that we all talk about, that we're letting our residents know what's going on in their city. So my first motion is that we meet as a committee of the whole. And if I have a second to that, we'll vote on it. If I don't, it goes down, we'll move to the next one.
I've already seconded it, Barbara.
Okay.
So we have a motion for a committee of the whole meeting to discuss this, and a second by Councilor O'Malley. The clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
DiMaria. DiMaria,
No,
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Tsige,
Yes.
Spatafora,
Yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Any other motions?
Motion to also hold a public hearing at that same meeting so that the public can testify.
Second.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I thought I had a second motion on the table, which
And what-
I haven't received a second for, so I'd like, before Councilor O'Malley makes that second, mine was that after, and I didn't specify a date, okay, that we hold a public hearing. But I think the public, you know,
Point of order. I already have a motion that's been seconded, which is on the floor.
Well, there's a question about whether or not Councilor Murphy has duly had a second on her second motion. Restate your second motion, Councilor Murphy, please.
I've said, this will be the third time I've said it, that we hold a committee of the whole meeting. And then after that, and I did not put a date on it, that we have a public hearing that would be advertised in multiple languages and out to the public to attend.
And so that's your second motion.
Because I think we
Okay, we hear you. That's your second motion.
yes.
And we may get a second on that one, or that may go down, and then we have a third motion so do we have a second on Councilor Murphy's motion that we hold a public hearing in multi-languages?
I'll second it. Councilor Tsige seconds it.
Councilor Tsige seconds that motion.
Point of clarification, what's the timing of that?
I would say at least a week afterwards so that we can actually come to some decision as to what we as a body think of, at least, you know, unravel the onion, so to speak, as to what the issues are, so we can present it to the public in a manner that they can understand.
So it's after the committee of the whole. That's just.
Yeah, I would think it would at least be a week later, so we can get our thoughts together and actually have a presentation for a public hearing.
Okay, we understand. Do we all understand that?
Okay.
Councilor Murphy is moving that we have a public. We've already voted the committee of the whole. Secondly, there's the motion and seconded that we hold a public hearing the week after, where we invite the general public for a public hearing on this to be communicated in multiple languages.
Could I make a friendly amendment to that? That be our final day to make a decision? So maybe we're going to make this in 2 weeks. So we vote up or down that day after that public hearing.
I'm fine with that.
All right.
Do we have a second to Councilor Winslow's amendment?
I'll second.
Yes. Can I ask a point of information here? Is this one we discuss how the abutters are notified? Because the Council Linehan made a motion. I just want to make sure that gets either wrapped into this one or talked about after. I don't care how it goes.
Let's do it after. Let's clear
Okay,
this one
that's
up and we'll after this one.
Yep.
So are we clear on this motion? All clear? All minds are clear? Clerk will call the roll.
This was on the friendly amendment by Council Winslow? Is that what we're voting on, or we're voting on Bob?
Just a vote.
Yeah, we can, let's do that. We'll do the amendment first.
Condon,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
DeMaria,
Yes.
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Murphy, yes.
O'Malley,
O'Malley, yes.
Sika,
Sika, yes.
Betafora,
Better yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Now, on the motion,
Okay, the motion.
as amended.
Amended. Condon,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
DeMaria,
Yes.
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Sika,
Yes.
Betafora,
Better yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. So that passes as well. Okay, I see a hand up. Councilor Condon.
Yes. Thank you, Council President. I'd like to get one question answered, okay? I understand we did Florence Street. We're gonna possibly be doing Center Street. I want someone to answer this question. Is the plan to do Main Street and Salem Street next? Because that could be a game changer for me. And is the plan to lose parking on those streets?
I see Councilor O'Malley has his hand up. Do you want to answer that, Councilor O'Malley?
I do. Councilor Condon, you have my word. There's no plan to do this, to do a dedicated bus lane on the streets that you just mentioned. I'm not privy to that. If someone else has a plan, I don't know. All we're talking about on Main and Salem Street is the transit signal prioritization. So the lights will be brand new, allowing the buses and the police and the fire to move through there quicker. We are not proposing a bus lane.
Could the gentleman from the MBTA confirm that? I'm sure he would know.
Are you looking to ask the question to
Yeah, I'd like,
Mr.
I appreciate Council O'Malley answering it, but could the gentleman from the MBTA who
Mr.
certainly
Berkman? We're
would-
going to let you allow him to speak. Eric Berkman, you've got the floor.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. It's Eric Berkman. I'm Director of Transit Priority for MBTA. I was on the meeting, the Traffic Commission meeting before, so thanks for having me again. I'll confirm that the current, the proposal doesn't have any removal of parking or bus lane on Salem Street. The bus lane segment that's proposed now as part of this grant is it's only on Center Street, and then the other two grants are on for signal improvements on Salem Street and on Main Street. So no bus lane or parking removal on Salem Street as part of these grants.
On Main Street?
Or Main Street, correct.
Okay, thank you.
And indeed, no parking removal on Center Street either, because it's the conversion of a traffic lane, not a parking lane.
Okay. Councilor Murphy has her hand up. Councilor Murphy.
Yes, Mr. Berkman, seeing as how you're there, I know you heard my statement about the fact that there are 11 city councilors, not a fewer number. So I'd appreciate, future communication going to all of us and not limited to a specific few. And I would also appreciate it if you would be at the committee of the whole meeting that we will schedule to answer questions. Because as Councilor Crowe had said earlier, when we're talking about Everett, they did not take away a lane of traffic, which is being proposed here. And I also want to go on record once again, as you just reiterated, we're talking about 3 separate grants. These are not MBTA grants. These are grants that will benefit the MBTA. So I want to make sure that when we have this next conversation, that we can have a rousing conversation with all of us as a part of what has been proposed, which we have been, I'm going to say, excluded from.
Thank you, Councilor.
I'm waiting for a response from Mr. Berkman.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure if your question was continuing.
No,
So,
I want to make sure you understand.
yeah, so I absolutely do. And this has been a little bit atypical because we usually are working with staff more so than counselors. But, as we're looking to support municipalities and in supporting all their stakeholders and all their road users, we will work with, anybody from the city, from a municipality who approaches us. So I apologize. It really was not my intent or the agency's intent to exclude anybody, but we have Councilor O'Malley and Councilor Winslow who are trying to champion this project. And, typically we don't work with counselors. Typically we work with staff for this exact reason. So I am sorry. I didn't want to exclude anybody, and that was not my intent. And then regarding, you had a second question. I'm sorry. It's late for me. I'm getting tired.
That's okay. I am too. But I just want to make sure I got my point across.
Yeah.
That, I would make sure that that you, if you are disseminating information, that you disseminate it to all 11 city councilors from this point forward.
Yep, I understand. We usually would rely on a staff person or a counselor to sort of champion that dissemination. So I'm sorry that didn't happen. And I heard what you said. But there was the second piece. What was the second piece of your statement?
At this point, it's late.
Sure.
I'm aggravated, so we'll let it go with that. We'll look forward to seeing you. I believe you heard me say maybe that was what it was at the committee of the whole, in case we have any questions for you.
Yep, I'll be there.
Thank you.
Councilor Di Maria.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that next week, Committee of the Whole, April 6th, that we do docket this for our 11 city councilors to ask questions, to go over the plan, so that we're not, it's been voted on that we do this prior to a public hearing. So I would like to make a motion of that, as well as make a motion that on behalf of Councilor Linehan's suggestion that I don't know if it's called 911 reverse call of all the residents in the city and businesses, whoever we have, and that we announce that in multiple languages, as well opportunities, as well as our language, English. So that would be my
Seconded.
motion. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson,
Seconded.
can I ask a question? I
Go
apologize.
ahead, Councilor Seeker.
This resolve has already been voted on. We shouldn't even be having this discussion. Once a matter has been voted on, you're supposed to move to the next agenda item. We shouldn't be taking up more motions on this resolve. We've already voted on them.
I think it was a scheduling, Councilor Sika. It was simply scheduling.
City Clerk, should we be having
Well,
this
I
discussion?
think I have to hop in here because next, on April 6th is the hearing for Dartmouth Street.
Council- Mr. Lucy, say that again, please.
April 6th is the hearing for Dartmouth Street.
We could have it at 6 p.m.
So then, when could that fit on the schedule?
We could have it on an off
We,
night.
we can have it at 5:30,
Mhm.
a committee of the whole discussion at 5:30?
You
That
can't
works.
have I don't believe you can have a hearing at 5:30. I think.
6
that's-
o'clock. Yeah, 6 o'clock.
Oh, the hearing.
Yeah.
But this is the meeting.
But this is the full meeting, of this next week would be the
Committee of
meeting
the whole.
of the whole,
Mhm.
or a committee of the whole. That's really what we're looking for here.
Right.
And the public hearing's coming after, correct?
And the public hearing will
Right.
be the following week.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So can anyone tell me why if we've got Florence Street to be discussed, at what time next week?
That's at 7.
7. So why could we not have the committee of the whole meeting at 5:30? Like we would normally have a committee meeting at 5:30. Anyone have objection to that?
No.
Then would someone make a motion that we hold the committee of the whole meeting at 5:30 next week? We'll suspend our normal time for 7 o'clock, where we would normally hold our committee of the whole for the purposes of discussing this situation.
I would make that motion, Counselor, Mr. President.
Do we have a
Seconded.
second for that,
Seconded.
Counselor?
Yep.
Okay.
We're not limiting ourselves on time, right?
What was your comment?
We're not limiting ourselves on time.
Well, that gives us an hour and a half.
Okay, I'm just saying, I think this, I mean, tonight it's 10:07. I mean, hopefully an hour and a half is enough. But I don't want to limit ourselves to an hour and a half if we're
I think
gonna,
it's a good start.
okay, but I don't want to tie ourselves into, we can't have more discussion if we haven't come to a conclusion.
Well, we could always, we're not gonna vote this until after we have the public hearing.
Okay.
Correct.
So we could always table, if we haven't come to any conclusions by 7 o'clock, we could always table it
Okay,
and resume after the Florence Street discussion if we wish to.
okay, all right.
Everyone for that?
Yeah.
No disagreement with that. So we have a couple of hands out. Councilor O'Malley, you have something that you'd like to, your hand is up? No? Councilor Spatafora?
Yeah,
Would
I
you
would just like to make an amendment to council. I don't know if it was, I think Council Marie was the last one. I'm getting tired myself. But Council Linehan, the only request that I would have is anybody on Center Street receive a letter. The reason why I have concerns with reverse 911, those are a lot of businesses. They're probably not going to pick up the phone for reverse 911. Some of them are corporate. They might not listen to it, you know. So I would just say everybody else can get reverse 911. There's not that many abutters on this stretch. It's probably under 50 letters. Just that they received the letter. Everybody else absolutely can do reverse
That's
911. I
fine.
don't have a problem with it. Yeah.
That's a good.
That's
idea.
fine. Yeah, great.
So we've got a motion, we've got a second to suspend the docket rules so that we can have the committee of the whole meeting to discuss this starting at 5:30 next Tuesday evening.
Right.
Will the clerk call the roll?
Condon,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes.
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Murphy, yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Tika,
No.
Spatafora,
Better yes.
Winslow,
So yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Okay, so we will have the meeting on this subject next Tuesday evening, Committee of the Whole, starting at 5:30.
Right.
Next order of business?
Okay, I have to go back one because I skipped it.
Yes, you did miss one. Yeah, I noticed that.
143-21, order that the city of Malden file with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development applications for grants under the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974 as amended, and the Cranston-Gonzalez Housing Act of 1990 as amended, to be administered by the Malden Redevelopment Authority for fiscal year 2022, including all understanding and assurances contained therein or on or substantially in the form presented to this meeting, and that Gary Christensen, Mayor and Chief Executive Officer of the City of Malden, be and hereby is directed and designated as the authorized representative for and in the name and behalf of the City of Malden to sign and file said plan, to act in connection with said plan, and to provide such additional information that may be required.
Counselor Murphy.
Motion to refer to finance.
Second.
On Counselor Murphy's motion, that we refer this paper to finance, seconded by Counselor Maria, or I think that was.
Yes.
The clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes.
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
Murphy, yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Tika,
No.
Spatafora,
Better yes.
Winslow,
So yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. That paper has been referred to finance. Next order of business?
Paper 145-21, committee report, public properties, petition, Cellco partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless, 83-21, to collocate small wireless facilities, also referred to as small cells, on existing wooden utility poles located within the public right of way, to grant the following petitions and be recommended out favorably to the full council. 52 Porter Street, 149 Webster Street, 235 Forest Street, 79 Lime Street, 187 Harvard Street, 51 Fairmont Street, 84 Boylston Street, 18 Warren Ave, 555 Main Street, 245 Bryant Street, 30 Ferry Street, 110 Green Street, 175 Broadway, 385 Lebanon Street, and 54 Newland Street, with the condition that equipment not be installed on any poles that are double poles or adjacent to double poles until National Grid replaces them, and these installations do not include mechanical cooling devices or fans.
So Council, that's the committee report. Counselor Linehan moves that we receive the committee report. Clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes.
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy,
No.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Tika,
Yes.
Spatafora,
Yes.
Winslow,
So yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Committee report is received. Counselor Linehan for the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is really the first big batch of new petitions that we had for small cell installations across the city that the committee's taken up this year. We definitely have a lot more to come. You'll be seeing them in regular, tranches, like we had referred a bunch earlier in the meeting. So we had a fairly well-attended public hearing on these petitions last week, undertook comments from the public as well as counselors, both on and off committee, and heard from our building commissioner, Nelson Miller, to vet them against our ordinance. After considering the discussion, we did have a motion to grant all but 5 of the petitions with the standard conditions around double poles and barring those mechanical cooling equipment or fans close to the ground. So the 5 that we tabled were as follows. 7 Broadway, for reasons relating to the condition of the pole, which appeared upon visual inspection to be leaning a lot. The next was 37-39 Willard, which Councilor Kamel had expressed concerns about relating to proximity to a residence. 130 Cross Street, which looked to be in a very sharply inclined, steep stretch of the street and may have had a double pole associated with it. And then 11 Phillip Street, where the pole is in a already pretty congested and in our opinion, somewhat messy arrangement of wires that need to be addressed. And then finally 52 High, which was also viewed to be very close to a nearby property. The rest were all unanimously recommended back to the floor favorably for approval.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy.
Yes, I'd like to go on record that it was not just Councilor Kamel who objected to the Willard Street location. It was Councilor Murphy and Councilor Kamel. Thank you.
So noted. Councilor Spatafora.
I just want, are we going to vote on all these at once? Because I did vote for it in committee, but 47 and, I'm sorry, is it 4740 Walnut Street? Which was really the 133 Cross Street, Council Linehan?
I think, yeah.
That was a double poll that was there, and that's the one with Council Crowe. I voted for it in committee, but I don't want to vote for it on the floor. So that's the only one I mean, we can vote everything else. I just want to make sure that I have the ability to vote no on that one.
I think that was one of the ones we had voted to table and not.
Did you say it?
back.
Oh, did you say it? I'm sorry.
I did, yeah, sorry.
Okay,
I know
I'm
that one
sorry.
had kind of the funny address on it.
Okay, yeah, okay. Maybe I was listening for 133 Cross and it wasn't. Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Mr. President. All set.
You're welcome, Councilor. So we have a motion to grant these petitions. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
By Councilor Di Maria. The clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Yes.
Crowe,
Yes.
Di Maria,
Yes.
Linehan,
Linehan, yes.
Murphy. Murphy,
No.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Tsige,
Tsige, yes.
Spatafora,
Better for yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Those petitions are granted. Now the next order of business.
Docket is clear.
Docket is clear. At 10:17 in the evening. Who would like personal privilege? Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would want to wish everyone a happy Easter. Holiday is coming up this Sunday, and I'm also hoping that everyone is enjoying Passover, because obviously that will end Sunday when Easter starts. And that was all I had to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Di Maria.
Actually, ditto. Happy Easter to everybody. Happy Passover. Happy Holi for those Indian people. And enjoy the blessed season. Thank you.
Councilor Winslow.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the same to everybody. Hoping every people are enjoying a happy Passover. Enjoy your Easter weekend and just this blessed season. Thank you. Great.
And Councilor O'Malley.
Hello, after this crazy meeting tonight, I just want to encourage the community. If anyone wants to run for office, let us know. We need great people on the city council, no matter what ward you're in, whether in your Ward 5 or Ward 4. Looking forward to people enter this race.
Thank you,
Good one.
Councilor. For those of you who are Christian, I will tell you that in my church, we refer to Easter as Resurrection Sunday. So happy Resurrection Sunday for my Christian friends, and to my Jewish friends, happy holiday to you all. The mayor asked that I mention that tomorrow evening from 6 to 7 p.m. Is going to be a Zoom meeting presented by the Board of Health, that they're going to be talking about the status of a kind of an update on the situation with the corona and the coronavirus and the inoculations and so forth. It'll be kind of a open discussion for people. So he encourages folks to tune in 6 to 7 tomorrow evening. And with that, I see no further hands raised. The hour is late, and I'm sure there's going to be a motion by someone here that we
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. And do we have a second to that? Anyone want to go home?
Second,
We are
clerk-
home.
We are
home.
The clerk will call the roll.
I mean, Steve's in the bus, but I'm home.
I'm going home. I've done it before, 10:45 on the 108 bus.
Yeah. Clerk will call the roll.
Condon,
Yes.
Crowe,
Yes.
Maria,
yes.
Linehan,
Linehan,
yes.
Murphy,
Yes.
O'Malley. O'Malley. Tsige,
Oh, you didn't hear me? Sorry.
Tsige,
Yep.
yes.
Spatafora,
About a 4 yes.
Winslow,
Winslow, yes.
Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Good night, everyone.